Live from America's heartland, this is the Daily Truth Report with your host, Noah Christopher.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And a big welcome back to a good friend of ours that we haven't chatted with for a while. And I'm so excited to have this guy back on. I can chat with him for hours. Jovan Hutton Pulitzer, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, very much.
Yeah, it's a real honor to get to chat with you, and got to know you a couple years ago, and ever since stayed in touch. And I just have so much fun at these, and we probably won't go for multiple hours, but we'll go for a while. And time
I'll
just
go as
flies.
long as you want to go.
Okay, that's cool. We are live right now. Let me just do a quick check with everybody. I always like to make sure we're connected. It looks like we are, but shoot me a comment. Oh, hey, here we go. All right, people are already connected. Just drop me a comment. Let me know where you're listening from. If you're live with us right now, it's Monday, March 24th, about 1 p.m. Central Time here. So we are. I'll make sure I can see those coming in from every different location. We're live on Twitter X. We're live on Rumble, and we're live on YouTube. Okay, and let me just get one more thing out here. Okay. Hello to Kathy. Okay, good. I'm seeing connections here. And let me do one more thing. Let me move Jovan over here. And there we go. That's better. All right. Well, I have so much to talk about today. We're going to bounce all over the place. So far in 2 years worth of time, I have not found a topic that Jovan doesn't have some knowledge of from his diverse background and everything, including we're going to talk today about the Egyptian pyramids. And of course, I learned recently, Jovan doesn't just sit in a studio somewhere or write patents in his office. He does all those things, but he's got a passion for archaeology, for actually going out and seeing all these places. So we're going to talk about this new Egypt news that broke about the Egyptian pyramids, the Giza pyramids. We're going to talk about what might be below those, some truly wild stuff that's coming out. We're going to talk about Trump and where things are at in terms of the transition in the next 4 years. And then since we're live, we'll see if we can take a few questions too. And we'll make that fun. So drop your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring that as we go. But I've got a ton of questions first. Jovan, let's put a pause on the pyramid stuff, and we'll do that in a minute. But let's talk Trump. I'm always excited and interested to get your opinion on this. The last time we talked was before the election, I think right. 1 or 2 months before. And you told us expect some tough periods of time after the election, no matter who wins. It's right. going to be a much longer, maybe permanent bad period of time if Kamala wins. Luckily, we dodged that bullet. But you were one of the first people to warn that even if Trump wins, it's going to be tough for a while. I think we're in maybe the beginning parts of that right now. There was kind of a nice honeymoon period. Stock market's up, Tesla's up, everything's exciting. And I don't want to take anything away from the Trump team. They are doing phenomenal work, but I think you're starting to see a little bit of that pushback now. And like an animal backed into, a rabid animal backed into a corner in a cage, there's going to be a lash out and a bite. So let me turn it over to you. Is that where you see us right now? And how long do you see that lasting? Do you see it getting worse from where we're at right now as tariffs go into place and all this other stuff? Let me just turn it over to you.
I think I would have equated prior to the election that we were possibly at the most precarious time in U.S. history. I now think we are at the most dangerous time in U.S. history. And here's why I say that. And the differences, although they seem subtle or monumental, different ends of the field from each other. And I'll use an analogy that General Flynn and I were discussing the other day is, I said, you can take a drug lord, Colombia or whatever, and let's say, the United States, we catch the mules at the border with $100 million in cocaine. And the cocaine gets seized and destroyed, and maybe the mules go to prison or whatever the case may be. Well, the drug lord already has that figured into their profit and loss margins, just like any other business. And they basically just crank out another shipment, get it ready, try a new way, just make sure they don't make the same mistake again. So you take the drug lord then, and you basically identify where their cash is, where they've got it stored and how they hide it.
USAID.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you take their cash away. Well, then that's a different game, because see what happens then is then the drug lord just wants to freaking kill you. It's no, the odds are they're going to retaliate against the United States government for intercepting a 10 million, even a $100 million shipment of cocaine are not that great. But when you cut off the money, right? And people that are criminals lose their funds, then they're going to basically go ballistic. And isn't it ironic? The drug of choice this time is the addiction to cash, and it's the government officials. So I'm submitting to you, we are quite possibly in the most dangerous times ever. Now, here's why. Everything we fought over these last 12 years, I'll say Obama era on, people are finally realizing, like you found out even in a recent release of USAID, that Obama said he was helping people in Cuba. The money was basically recycled back, and he was using it to bus in agitators and outfit Antifa and BLM for riots, which they said was not true, but it ends up being true. These people have arranged armies during this time, and they've taught people how to become weapons and how to fight for that evil and or socialist agenda. And so right now, Trump is fighting corrupt foreign countries. We now know that our own government gave $260 million to George Soros. I told people they'll give you a bad guy to hate, because as long as you're hating on the bad guy, you're not looking at them. True. They were funding Soros using it back against us, making even more money. And so I think there's probably easily 20 different major factions that want to obliterate the Trump administration, and each of them have their own multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar agenda. And it really terrifies me a little bit about what could happen and how that could go on. And that's why I equate this as the most dangerous time in American history ever. Think about it. We've had world wars because of what Hitler did, and we all get into basically not have Hitler take over. But now imagine would be fighting like 10, 20 world wars with different enemies and different tactics and tools all at the same time. It may very well soon become a free-for-all.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I think you're, of course, spot on. And but I guess I'll flip it on you a little bit. I'm almost surprised he's made it this far. I mean, is he just so insulated and protected, or how do you think he's managed it? Even, I mean, we know we had the 2 assassination attempts, maybe more that we don't know about. But from the election in November to the inauguration in January, and now it's March. How's he made it this far?
Well, I think, number one, by the grace of God. I basically think that moment that the one assassin, whoever it was, pulled the trigger, and him turning his head ever so slightly where it didn't hit him right smack in the head in the face, was only a sign from God, period. Just it's too divine, the timing in that.
Yeah.
But I don't think the man's protected. I really don't. I called Butler when I did my forensic analysis of the shooting in Butler at that one event. I basically explained that had to go all the way to the top to have our Secret Service and the Stadies and everything else involved and turn away to create that pie opening in the gap. And of course, now here we have people finally blowing whistles and stuff saying that maybe Josh Shapiro, the governor in Pennsylvania, was involved.
Yeah.
That all was minor compared to what's going on now. I just want people, let's just take the assassination attempt. What we knew at the time is they hated Trump no matter what. What we knew at the time is they just wanted to control us. Now take Butler, Pennsylvania to today. Today, I don't care who you are and what party, you have been raped massively, repeatedly, horribly, and they are selling out America. It hands down. You can see the money. Why do we have 4 million people that are 115 years or older on Social Security? Because they've been hiding it and manipulating us. That's an incredible, dangerous game. And so we're not in the same time period. It may feel like we're winning, and yes, we are. But we're winning do not slack, do not ease up, because I'm telling you, evil some way is going to come roaring back with a vengeance. It's going to try to extract its pound of flesh. It's going to be directed at the White House and President Trump to cause disruption, or I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, come on. I think the pandemic was to take out as many as we can. And if they're already showed in times they would do that, what do you think they would do when we now know they stole trillions from us?
Yeah. Do you see a point where this most dangerous time in history starts to abate and go away in the next 4 years, or is it just going to be a constant? We're on the edge of our seat this whole term.
It's not going to go away. And here's why it's not going to go away. And it's just the addiction of money. Let's say, you're just out of college and you paid $200,000 for that degree, which was useless. You can't apply, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden you get a job in government and they're dropping on you 200 grand. All of a sudden you think you're in the snizzle, right? You're getting 200 grand, or maybe you even make more. And you got trained, you got weaned in that for the Biden administration or before. Well, all of a sudden you realize that money train's going away, or these politicians that realize the whole time we told America we're the good guys, and now I took 50 million, or I took 20 million, or 10 million, or 100 million. They see the writing on the wall. Nobody who's ever had that amount of money in their life, or the amount of money that will transform your life, ever wants it to go away. And this is the crosshair between, they don't want the gravy train to go away, but it's not like losing a job. They also don't want the whole freaking country to hate them for the rat bastards they are. They don't want to go down in history as being part of the rat bastards machine. And so I think that's what makes this dangerous. I do not see them letting up. I don't. Now, it's going to be a toss-up, and I wouldn't call this letting up, if President Trump and those around him are willing to play enough hardball to get some important convictions. Because I think it would probably only be the convictions that will tell the vast majority of these people, go away, disappear, it's over, but you ain't coming back. And if you push it, we're going to lock you up. And you have to understand the trend in that. Remember all these other generals and stuff on the inside that said Trump was an issue and we need an Article 25, him and get him out of there. The Hunter laptop was true. You got to understand, President Trump and Doge has affected them too. When he revokes security clearance, here's what America thinks. America thinks, well, they just can't hear secret briefings. Nuh-uh. A low-level security clearance will almost guarantee you in consulting $2 million a year. And that's at the low level. If you have super high-level security clearance, you're probably pulling $10, $20, $30 million a year in consulting fees because you have those clearances and you guide people around what's going on in the geopolitical states. And so not only has he effectively neutered in many ways the money that goes around in the system and launders and pays it off, he's hit them directly in the pocketbook, them too, directly in the pocketbook, which means maybe for the first time, you're living off that savings, baby, because that regular revenue gravy train coming in just got shut off.
Wow. Yeah, he truly is, even in ways that we didn't understand before. He's truly cutting off every source of their funding.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But it's illegal. When I say it's illegal, they try to shut conservatives down because we're telling the truth that they're stealing money. He's shutting off the illegal stuff.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Their fight is, no, you got to keep the illegal going because that's my money. It's ironic.
Jovan, maybe you can explain this to me. I don't understand this at all. I understand the reason why the deep state would set up a system like this, but what is ostensibly the reason given for people like Hillary or Kamala Harris or any of these other people or all these retired generals? I get how it's a gravy train for them and that's great for them. But what is the stated reason for them having security clearances in the first place? They're not in any sort of elected office right now. Why do they have these things?
Well, yes and no. Many people that cycle out of the government at many times can be asked to continue to consult with the government. Then you also have to understand they try to keep their political license active. Stay with me for a moment. Let's take Brnovich in Arizona, the Arizona AG that never looked at the election stuff.
Yeah.
His only goal in running for senator that last time is he needed 2 more years as an elected official of some type, then he would qualify for the pension that pays him $750,000 a year for the rest of his life.
Wow.
And so there's many, many games at play. Keeping it active and keeping their security clearance active, and why these people do that is so administrations can always reach out and tap people, and they don't have to go through the various approval processes to give a president advice or stuff. And so it's just kind of been the norm to let everybody stay active, because history is one of the best lessons. They've been there, they've been through it. Now, once it's revoked, you've got to go through a tremendous amount of hoops to get it reinstated. So it's more of just keeping the options open. It's kind of been politeness in politics to keep it open. It's kind of been, okay, well, you served your government, and we're not going to make it where you can't benefit from your government experience. You can't do things illegal, but that you served your country. So this is kind of one of the perks of the jobs. So it's been a polite wink, wink, nod, nod, but it's all been used against us.
Yeah.
And it's been the security clearance. Let me give you an example. The way they laundered the money is by going through the legal process to appropriate it. That's the legal process. We fought for it. We voted on it. We appropriated it. Here it's go. But that stops when that first transfer happens to that NGO or that 501c3. From there, they get to use it any way they want. If they cycle that back, that's technically not a crime, right? It's hard to prove that it was 100% nefarious, because you got to go up here. Well, that's all the appropriation was for. And that's kind of how they play that racket. But that security clearance continually gives them the authorization to sit inside, to listen to conversations, to be privy to important state meetings, like President Trump behind the scenes saying, we're going to close these loops. And he says, I'm going to make it a law if you send the money back. Or any portion of it, and it's not disclosed, it's a crime. Let's say he's doing that. Well, by having that security clearance and they keep it all open for people, one of those rat bastards is going to hear it before it happens. And that's
absolutely.
how they keep each other informed, trying to cut it off. But it's also why he has to cut it off. But that's really the more valid part of it. And then you also have to understand it's also a relationship business. It's a greasy business, but it's a relationship business. And so they need something done in Russia. And here's this person that's got great relationships over there, and a current administration is not sure if they're getting good intel. They'll reach back out to somebody in the community and says, okay, look, you put 12 years in over at Russia or whatever. What's your take on it? Will you talk to your people on the ground and kind of give me the back channel so we know how to read this? In that case, it's an important asset, and they have to be read in for it. And that's why they keep those things open. So in shutting it off, I think he's 100% right. I mean, 100% right in shutting it off. And you got to understand that's not popular, because you understand the moment that President Trump did that for Hillary, for other people in the former administrations, or even for the children, the moment he made that decree, he also guaranteed that when he's out, his children will not be protected, because it works both ways. And they are going to ply it back. If they ever get back into power, they're going to ply it right back. And that's how you know President Trump made a decision for the people versus a decision for the politicians, because every Republican going forward will be subject to this standard, which has now been set, that everybody before just played nice, but we're past playing nice.
Yeah. Do you think he has any chance of enacting such permanent and long-lasting reforms that he can really reform this system. I mean, you're never going to get rid of evil altogether. I mean, we all know that. It's been around since Bible times. But does he have a chance of laying a strong enough foundation here in these 4 years that we can at least fend it off for quite a while? Or in 2028, if Vance doesn't win, are we just right back to square one?
The most important thing that's going on right now is for you who are watching to understand you're the ultimate solution to this. You're the ultimate cure. So for right now, everything's about you. If you're learning and your eyes are open and you're seeing the difference this makes, then you now know you vote every time that voting booth is open, something that conservatives haven't done that Democrats did. Now, it's going to be if we carry that torch. Mel K said, DC is not the swamp. The swamp is the United States of America. DC is the sewer. And that's very true. And so if we want to cut the swamp out of America, we have to learn from this, because we're the ones that ultimately have to hold all of these rat bastards accountable. We have to stop voting for people because we like them and they're popular. We have to learn how to audit our lawmakers just like we audit elections. We're going to have to learn to inspect what we expect. Now, that will come about in these 4 years. Okay. That will happen. America's seeing it, and America's seeing it in a very significant way. If you watch, all the Democrat numbers are down. People are leaving the Democrat Party. Now, if we can stay in power, through a Vance administration or whatever, we will ultimately, and I think it will be the demise of the Democrat Party. But I also want to let people know, you also witnessed the death of the GOP. And here's what I mean. The GOP we had before Trump coming in, the McCains and Romneys and stuff, that's dead. We now have a new GOP because we know what rhinos are. And that's what they were afraid of when Trump first ran. He was going to run independent and start a third party. Well, he agreed to run for the GOP, and he's remade the GOP. So I think out of this, we'll get 2 new parties. But if this truncates itself, and it's not in the next general election, it's at the midterms, we stand a very strong chance in midterms 26 that President Trump is going to be lame to duck, which basically means he doesn't have the House and Senate behind him, so he can't get anything done. But let's say we survive that, and he manages to go the rest of the 4 years, you're going to see a tremendous amount of breakthroughs. But if it's only for 4 years, they're just going to erase the vast majority of it with a pen, which again falls back on our shoulders as citizens, that we know what's up, what's real, and we fight hard in elections to make sure they never get back into power. Wherever it is, it falls back on us, not on him.
Yeah, no, that's good. What do you think the chances are of having, I guess, what I would call like a general public awakening? I think you already commented on, these government workers, and he's cutting hundreds of thousands of government workers. They're never coming around. They're pissed off that they lost their $200,000 paycheck. But the average American who's voted Democrat their whole life, and they've got Trump derangement syndrome. Now they've got Elon derangement syndrome. They're lighting Teslas on fire. These people, or even a little bit less extreme of those people. But do we have any chance of breaking through to some of those people? You just said the Democrat Party is losing numbers. Do we have a chance of getting these people to have that wake up moment where they say, gosh, all he's trying to do is save the country, cut the waste and fraud from the people that are stealing from me? Do we ever get that moment from the general public?
Well, I think it's happening, but in a generation like myself, and I'm older than you, and then in your generation, I think unfortunately we're kind of set in our ways. And so I think those are gone. But you go to the young people who pop out of college and they find out their multiculturalism, race studies degrees ain't worth a shit to wipe your butt on, right? And they're trying to pay for rent and everything else, and they're getting clobbered. I think they're waking up. If we put some effort into talking to the younger generations, it's going to be the younger generations that save us. But if you look at some of the protesters and you look at the people holding these stupid meetings, I mean, I'm surprised how much gray hair I see in there. I'm going, you smoke too much dope in the 60s. Get your ass out of here and do it. And so there's a lot invested in that old age look that just doesn't want to let go. And we're the hippies of yore that all of a sudden we're hip again with the Biden and or Harris stuff. But I do have hope our younger generation sees it for what it is, because they are the most economically impacted. And ironically, even more than us, they were the most shut down. Why? Can't tell a girl she looks nice in school. You can't tell a dude you have a dong, you're not a girl. You can't tell a chick get out of the boys' bathroom where you're playing like you're a boy. They have far more rules than we have in schools and stuff that are being pushed on them. Wear masks, get shots, and all of this. So I think you're going to see a grand revitalization of kids that are from that 16 to probably 28 sweet spot, that are really going to be the ones that pull us out of it, because they were the ones that had the most brunt of their life stopped because of the pandemic and a stolen election.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I've seen that in our local community here, kids in high school and junior high. And, their the natural default of that age in any generation has always been to kind of rebel against the status quo and the whatever's in the authority position. And that authority position has been telling them that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, and stay home and put your mask on, and you can't say these words because these words hurt.
And at the same time saying, follow the science. Well, science tells me that's a wanker, but you want me to ignore it.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Don't follow the science, just not the chromosomes. We don't care about those anymore. But they're from what I've seen, they're laughing at this stuff and they're rebelling against it, and they think it's a joke. And so ironically, I think there is a lot of hope for that generation coming through and getting us out of this crap.
And it's at a nice trend. That generation is also saying, I don't want the big McMansion. I don't want to be shallow. I don't want to be in crushing debt. I want to have healthier foods. I want to live simpler. I want meaningful relationships, not passive relationships. We're kind of, again, history's making a social loop back where we might actually get some better grounded people out of it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, circling back to Trump a little bit, and then maybe we'll move on to a different topic, but it's so fascinating to get your thoughts on all this stuff. I've been blown away by everything he's done. I mean, I would say he has fulfilled almost every campaign promise and then some, and, stuff that people, even some of the diehard believers didn't know that he could do. Like, I mean, he's essentially shut down the Department of Education, and I could just go on and on. What's your assessment? You think he's done a great job? Is he missing the mark anywhere? Does he have the right people around him?
I think he's done a fantastic job. I think he's made some brilliant decisions. I think if you're still one of these on the fence about Elon, is he making a difference? I think he's proved his pudding, especially when he gave up 120 billion in wealth to do this, because that's how much they've driven the stock down.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing some good stuff. I still have some questions on some of the people. I would be remiss if I didn't say I'm still kind of questioning Pam Bondi. I want to see some things. I am concerned. There's so many bullshit redactions, even in the JFK stuff coming out. What, from 70 freaking years or 60 years later can even still be so secret? We got to keep it. I don't buy it.
Well, real quick, just so everyone knows what you're talking about, the news just came out a couple days ago. They've brought on 1,000 new agents from the FBI to work on redacting the Epstein documents. 1,000 agents that are working 12-hour overtime shifts round the clock until everything is redacted. And this is on the heels of, and I'm with you. I'm holding out judgment. I'm hoping for the best with Pam Bondi and even Kash Patel. Now Bongino's in there. All three of those, I want to stand up and have their backs. But Kash went on, and I've never spoken to Kash. I thought he was fantastic. I was so excited for the appointment. But he went on all these shows over the last 4 years, and he said, on day one, I'm going to walk in there and release the Epstein files. And that implies no redactions, because you just walk in and and maybe it's not day one, right? But it's, week one to week two, something. And clearly that's not happening. So has someone gotten to him? Has he been given orders from higher up than him?
No, I just think it's the reality. I think it's the reality of it's naivete. It's the reality of dealing with something at that high of level that, yes, you want to release it, but then you find out you can't. You don't even have the power to do it when you're the head of the FBI.
And what does that mean, Jovan? I mean, so then someone is giving him orders higher than him.
No, I think it's more intra-agency entanglement,
Mm,
right? I think it's
okay.
intra-agency entanglement. And I think it's also here's how I look at it. If there's actually, and we're pretty sure there are, let's say they were trafficking, it was pedo bonanza, right? Hot
Mhm.
dogs and pizza all over the place.
Hmm.
If the Trump administration expects convictions as a result of it, truly expects we're going to nail these bastards for diddling kids, you now have to understand the process of law. The process I think people aren't understanding, and that if that list got out and it truly named the criminals made public, then you'll find an interesting thing comes into play, that the Justice Department and otherwise, the first fight would be they cannot get a fair trial in any state because their name has been exposed, and you cannot nowhere set an impartial jury.
Hmm.
I mean, that's just the truth. You can have something so over publicized. It's why they'll move a trial from one county that's controversial to another county. And that has worked in many scenarios, but not this one.
Mhm.
And so if they were dropped prematurely and you're really wanting to nail people, if that's truly your intent, a total drop of transparency would assure nobody got convicted,
Hmm.
because it's not a double jeopardy issue. It's an issue of, could they be judged by a group of peers that weren't prejudiced? And every attorney defending them will say, look, everybody in the world said that this is a pedo rapist, and here their name on a list, and now it's truly associated with pedo rapist. They can't get a fair trial, therefore you can't try them.
Hmm.
So I tend to err on that side, that they're angling for convictions to do it. Now, you got to ask, what makes the most sense? I've said before, and it's been controversial, I don't give a rat's ass if anybody of consequence goes to jail over the election stuff. And I'll give you a good example. If they arrested Hillary tomorrow for her emails or election interference or raising money wrong, would it change anything? Well, a bunch of people sitting at home by the millions go, freaking A, man. But would it change anything?
Mm.
No, it wouldn't even move the needle.
Mhm.
And we've got to understand, if we're going to fix this, we've got to move the needle, which means we've got to move the mechanisms and machines and do it right and understand how it is. And so now is a time where many people just want the vindication of what I call a shallow victory. And it might seem great, but it won't move anything. Now, that's the exact tactic that gets played on us. I'll give you an example. When the Me Too movement truly got movement of the people and people got pissed, what did the system do? Well, all they did was sacrifice Harvey Weinstein. So they gave you a sacrifice. There you go. You got a bad guy. We put him in jail. Look at him. He's a freaking bad guy. And
Right.
then it went away.
Mm.
That's how they get us to stop. Okay, we'll give you somebody to prosecute. Here you go. And so that's the catch-22 in this nastiness. Do we want it forever eradicated? Do we want to stop the international trafficking? Do we want to understand how it works? Who's really getting paid? How do they get the criminals out, right? How do they get the kidnappings out? How do they target families? Where do they send these children? What's the Underground Railroad for it? Well, then you got to be in it, and you got to be in it for a while to figure it out, versus you just bust one guy that, diddled 5 little girls and 5 little boys, and he happened to be a judge. Great. I've always told you, they will give you the Satan. They will give you the evil to hate, because as long as you're going, see that rat bastard, I knew they do it. You know what you're doing? You're not looking over here at this whole organization that actually enables that. And so I have to trust we're playing to win, not playing to score.
Yeah, well, that makes a ton of sense. And but then I guess that the fallback question then, like I think you just said, is it just ignorance or lack of experience then for Bondi and Cash? Why does Jovan Pulitzer understand that perfectly, but Pam Bondi goes on Fox News and says she's going to dump the Epstein files the next morning by 8 a.m. That's just woefully inept if that's the case. But is she fit for that role?
Well, then you have to question, I didn't pay attention when she said that. Now, here's what I mean. If I was to go back and analyze the day Pam Bondi said that, and that's when I'm going to do it, I think it would be incumbent upon us to go back and analyze anywhere from 1 week to 72 hours prior to that statement. I want to know what was cooking, what was trending, what was making the GOP or the president look bad, or in international negotiations, what was going sideways, right? And that could hurt us or was really hurting us.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of that culture is we're getting freaking clobbered. We got to make people not lose faith. We're getting our asses kicked. And so maybe they make a statement like that, which is basically taking one for the team because people have short memories.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to reserve judgment, one, because I didn't pay it. I wasn't thrilled with that announcement, just being honest with her. But I would rather go back and I'd try to audit 72 hours to a week before, put it into context of what was going on and why the system needed that statement at that time. What were they doing? Because after all, it's still politics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Well, let's hold out hope that Bondi and Cash and Bongino can get things turned around. And I do think they're good people. I think on many levels they're the right people in there. Let's hope they can do it. What about and I don't want to turn this into naming a ton of names, but just curious, you were kind of going down a road there. You said Bondi. Anybody else that kind of got a head on the Trump team or around? But the rest of the team, I mean, Lutnick, Bissett, Witkoff, I've been so impressed by some of these people.
I think overall the people are very impressive, and I'm very pleased with it. Of course, my particular passion is fixing what is wrong with our elections. I still worry to this day about who has the president's ear at any time. I'm only effective with the president when I'm sitting down with him eyeball to eyeball and showing him it and we're discussing it. That's about the only time you can count on it.
Mm-hmm.
Past that, he's the most important man in the world. He's running a country. He doesn't have time to think about me, right? And so in that scenario, you're only good as the bandwidth you can get focused by him. Now, granted, I've been able to be a little bit different with them. Most people, get an average of 3.5 to 4 minutes. My last meeting was 96 minutes, which in presidential terms is an eternity.
That's so cool.
And so, but you never, excuse me, you never know who has his ear at any one time. And so that does concern me. But when I think about our elections, I sit here and remember, as an inventor and stuff, my job's to see the future. You invent something that's going to be used in the future. That's how you monetize it. You don't invent something nobody use. And so as I look forward, I realize we're in trouble in 2026. And only right now are people really starting to pay attention. I mean, in the last few days, whether it be, amplifying General Flynn or amplifying my work, when you see Elon engaging with my work and stuff online, you go, freaking A, we're finally getting it and we're looking at the right stuff. But again, those are moments in time.
Mm-hmm.
Moments in time with very powerful people and very powerful schedules. It means we're there, but compared to what any of us in our real lives world deal with, you've got to understand at that particular level, you are stretched 9,000 different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And every day and every moment is a negotiation. And every day and every moment, you have to be worried about what you said and who you said it to and who you let in. And so, do I believe there's a lot of great wins we've had? Sure. Am I 100% sold on the team? No. Can I sit back now and logically recognizing politicking when it's politicking? I even watched a lot of this stuff about ambassadors and see news releases that such and such person might be ambassador to this country, and I'm behind the scenes and I know that's total bullshit. But the reason that person paid somebody to release that release is because they want to capture as much mindset. Well, I thought that person was going to be the ambassador. It's really wicked on all levels of it. And at the end of the day, there is no understanding it because there is no rhyme or reason. Ethics are very hard to come by. I believe President Trump is exercising his ethic. It's like this Coke battle and all these, people coming out for Maha, Make America Healthy Again, but they're bitching about getting rid of soda and welfare. And then you find out they were paid about it.
Paid, yeah.
But then if you look, which is fine, but I don't think you should follow someone for their opinion when you find out, well, they really only said it because they got paid. I don't quite jive with that. But at the other side of the spectrum, you watch how President Trump responded to that. He basically said, I'm all for taking the soda and sugar out of the SNAP program. And then he said in the next sentence, and if I still want to drink their shit, I will. So, right? That's called free will, baby. And the government should do what you want them to do to take care of a country, not, make sure Coke gets $6 billion a year from that little sugary drink. So nothing's really ever as it seems. But this is why I think more people are educated than ever. More people know how the system works than ever. More people are reading bills than they've ever read before. More people are auditing politicians and actors and actresses and famous people than ever before. So from that standpoint, it's all good, baby. But again, it comes back to us. And if we keep on holding people accountable, we keep on demanding truth and transparency, and we carry that torch, we will see it all the way through. If we allow it to go out of sight, out of mind, well, shame on us. We let it die on the vine.
So we're still a bit early on the one hand, but on the other hand, not really at all. Midterms are right around the corner. As it stands here today, I mean, I've heard you say that, rightly so, that Democrat numbers are going down. Trump and his team is obviously doing well right now. As you see it today, are we on track to have a good round of midterms and add to the lead in Congress, or do you view that as shaky right now?
Not at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Number one, you just got to audit the whole system. Let's just audit the whole system. From what happened in 2020 with President Trump, 2022 with Kari Lake, 2024 with Kari Lake, 2024 with President Trump, they let him win and they stole the down ticket. Nothing's changed. Not a single issue has changed. Not one law, not one action. So you got to understand the same exact voting system we had that got all the rat bastards in that took from us in 2020. That's still there. Now, they want to try to get rid of the machines and one-day voting, which I agree with, and, proper ID, which I agree with. But, when you hear proper ID, most people take a brain shortcut. They got to have a legal driver's license. No, it didn't. They can bring an illegal from across the border, enroll them in a college class to learn English, which the government pays for, and they give them an ID from the college, and that qualifies as a proper ID. But did it say that's a bona fide citizen? No, it doesn't. It's all about the words. And therefore, I think the fight's, again, bigger. You have to understand these things don't happen in a vacuum, and the evil takes nothing for chance. And so while we got to 2024, I think they knew they couldn't do anything about Trump. So they basically kept counting for 60 days so they could change down ticket.
Yeah, we saw those continue to flip like weeks after the election. Here, another one just flipped. Yeah.
And that tells you that they're still in play. Now, what made it more nefarious is the 4 years leading to Trump being back in. I'm fighting to clean the voter rolls. At that same time, the right is putting people on the road saying, don't clean the voter rolls. It's like sweeping a dirt floor. Well, what the Biden administration did during that time when we should have, but didn't clean the voter rolls, is they stuck 8 to 10 million more illegals on it. That's ammunition in the gun that's pointed straight at us, double barrel 2026. Now, even if we have hand counting,
okay,
let's say we have hand counting. Does somebody sitting there at a hand counting know which person voted that was dead, which person that voted was illegal, which ballot is counterfeit? You got to understand, the magic trick happens before the reveal. It's never at the time of the reveal. The magician probably did it 2 or 3 minutes earlier. They used the last 2 or 3 minutes to take your mind off and forget it, and then the reveal. That's not the point of magic. It happened way back. And so that magic trick has already been done. And so again, it comes down to words. Hey, we'll go to 1 day voting, voter ID. Okay, well, you got 1 day voting. Well, you got to bank your ballot for people that can't get out. Well, if that's still voluntary and anybody can request an early ballot, that's still mail in. And if any ID allows you to vote, library card, right? Electric bill, any of that, it still doesn't solve the issue. That's why we have to get serious about it, because I believe they've loaded the shotgun double barrel with a lot of junk in that barrel, and they're ready to pull it in 26. And right now, I don't see anything doing to change it. I know they're working on some low level fruit, but I'm not convinced 100% we have it under control enough yet to protect our republic come midterm. Don't know. It's a wild card right now.
So what would be the top 1 or 2 or 3 things if you had another one of those 90-minute meetings with President Trump that he could do immediately? And maybe it's not him. Maybe it all has to be local, state and local. I don't know. But if you're king for a day, Jovan, what are the top 1, 2, or 3 things you do immediately to shore up 2026?
I'm not convinced it's local anymore, because the GOP put so many operatives on the road feeding locals BS that it wasted everybody's time. But we already have the solution. See, the system tells us there are no such thing as dead voters. There's no such thing as illegal voters, that it's very rare. Well, you got to understand, we were just given a gift. And this was my messages back to Elon. Look, you found 4.2 million people that were on Social Security that are supposedly 115 and older. That's great. I now go back and let's record merge them with voting. And I want to find out how many of those 115-year-olds voted. I love how long they've been voting. And I guarantee it's going to be a large amount of those that are going to show as active voters. And that's how we're going to bridge this. Here's where money was being stolen. Here's why they kept them on the books. And yes, they vote. And if I can get that part of the merge, which Elon the last time tweeted either triple or double exclamation points, I said, hey, do this now, merge it with this. If that actually happens, then I think the whole dam will break open. And the world will have to look at the evidence. And we may get to the point that the president has the ability to shut it all down and regen it up. The data's there. We just got to apply it the right way and investigate it fully.
I love that. Yeah, as you were speaking, the 2 situations are identical. And all the people that want to criticize, we don't need to clean off the voter rolls. Yeah, these people are dead, but it's not a big deal. It's the exact same thing they say about the Social Security rolls. Yeah, they're dead, but they're not really getting checks. They're not doing any harm. Just leave them there. It's nonsensical.
Just the other day, Elon amplified when I was talking in Arizona about 10,000 people. I happened to be speaking in Arizona, and I said 10,000 people in the United States of America have the exact same Social Security number. And I'm talking about how bad the databases are.
I saw this, yeah.
Now the left spun it. I said there were 10,000 people in Arizona with the same Social Security number, and all of them voted. That is not what I said. So all this big rush comes out, and the people, it's fraud, it's fake news, or whatever. Well, they twisted it to get a fact check. But then I said, even though I didn't say that, let me show you something. There are a little less than 4 million possible voters in the state of Arizona. Maricopa County is the 4th largest county in the United States, 2nd largest voting group of people as a block of people. And there's basically 2.6 million. How many of those voters on those rolls, if you try to confirm who they are compared to the last 4 digits of their Social Security just to prove they're valid, how many do you think come back as not valid? Now, granted, I said that 10 million people used the exact same Social Security and voted in Arizona. That's not what I said. 10,000 people in the U.S. had the same social, it's across the U.S., but this is what has our voting system broke. So you got a population of 2.5 million people, possible real voters, right?
Yep.
How many of those do you think are wonky and can't be verified by even just the last 4 digits of the social security number? What would be a bad number?
Into the thousands?
Give me a number.
50,000.
Not bad. 337,000.
Oh, wow. and all these counties are divided by a much smaller
In just one
margins.
place.
Yeah. Wow.
In just one singular place. Absolutely confirmed by the Social Security Administration, running it against the voting index just to ping it and see if this is a valid person by the last 4 digits of their social. And in one area, you got 330,000 no-goes. Come on.
So there is, I mean, big tech has been an enemy of the state for a while, but now big tech with people like Elon, Jeff Bezos is trying to play nice, and so is Zuckerberg. I don't trust either one of them, but Elon seems to be a good guy, and big tech loves to solve problems at scale. And so potentially you get Elon in there writing some code, modernizing the systems, getting rid of the COBOL systems, allowing cross-referencing between the departments. I'm hearing you say there's a real chance to make a dent in this thing.
We can do this. Here's what we need. We need Google's AI with a big chunk of Grok, which is X and Elon. We need the distributed computing power of AWS, which is the Amazon Web Services.
Yep.
Because here's how it works. And I did this in the Arizona audit. Most people think about when you're checking numbers, you're looking, you're doing it on a computer, you're running a spreadsheet. That's what you're used to. People tend to think in the physical universe, like us talking on computers. In the world where all of us really work in doing this, computer vision, machine learning, artificial intelligence, what I do is I go in and build a spec for a very fast machine. In other words, I need it to have 12 dual processors. I need this much memory. I need this much computing power. And you build this machine spec of what you want to crunch these numbers fast enough. And then with a click of a button, I can deploy 100 of them, or I can deploy 5,000 of them. And it's all virtual. So now in the virtual world, I have deployed 5,000 of these machines, which would just like your desktop. Now they're all working together, and you feed it the data and you can crunch through it. That's where, if big tech gets behind it, because it benefits everybody, why we need to load some of this out, because it's just massive computing power. But we could undo 70 years of bullshit within a matter of a week. And that's what they rolled in. When you saw Elon coming in and you saw Doge and you saw the 14 big black cases, those were basically 14 supercomputers, because you can do it. And you have to do it there resident. What we had to deal with in Arizona. We had to do a certain amount resident. You had to pull it off safely in drives, which was an ungodly amount. You have to send the drives across the country with different carriers, different routes, so nobody could ever intercept the information. You got to get it back to one location. You got to take all of those drives and you got to ingest it back into your super system. Just that process of ingesting, getting it back in, takes 11 days. And then you can turn it back on and you can do it. There's a lot of steps people don't understand with munching super data. But yes, if we did it in a distributed way, just doing the analytics part of it, we could find all the issues. That's how you find 55,000 Democrat NGOs that were funneling money. That's how you do it. We've got to turn computing to this and take the leapfrogs and find it quick.
Well, that's one of the most promising things I've heard, really, of anything from anybody. That's exciting.
It can be done. It's amazing. It can be done. AI is not our enemy. Machine learning, computer vision, it's not our enemy. Right? I use all the same tools that everybody says is going to take over the world to find out what happened in the audit. It's up to the operators and who's doing it. It's just like, people get killed by guns. No, they get killed by people who had a gun.
Absolutely.
It's the people in programming behind everything. And in life, you are only one of 3 things. You're either a good guy or you're a bad guy. If you can be compromised in any way, bought off, you're a bad guy. So you're either good guy, bad guy, or you're apathetic. And apathetic means you're culpable to the evil, not culpable to the good, because with apathy and doing nothing only comes evil.
That's right. Yeah, it's never the technology, it's never the tool. It's TV was going to rot the brain, the internet was evil, and none of these things are true. Our guest today is Jovan Pulitzer. Having so much fun here, Jovan. This is so much fun to chat with you. I've got one question that several questions have come in, but
Sure.
I want to really spotlight this one. I think it's really good, and I haven't touched on it yet. Your thoughts on all of these district court judges, rogue judges, far left judges. One judge in the Eastern District of New York can halt an entire presidential agenda. I understand checks and balances. I understand the three branches of government. They all check each other, but one district court judge often Timbuktu should not be stopping the president. Your thoughts?
I agree. For number one, that particular judge or any judge at that level is not a checks and balance system. That's number one.
Mhm.
They're not the three branches. And this wasn't done through the three branches. Number two is if any judge in the world at that simple level in a district can stop the executive order of a president, then I question, why in the hell do we have a president?
Yes.
Right? It basically means the president is a token office. I don't believe that. Now, I understand they're going through machinations, but if I was Trump, I'd say, screw you and the pooch you ran in on and sue my ass. We're doing it anyway. See if you can stop it. Right?
Well, then
I wouldn't care about it.
Do you just get drugged down with 2 more years of an impeachment trial again? Does he
Probably.
get derailed?
Probably. See, that's the balance. They've weaponized this stuff. I can find no logical reason that a lone judge like that, especially with some of these judges that have such incestuous ties to monies and actions and USAID,
Yeah.
that's even allowed. In fact, if anything, I'd write an executive order that if you are a judge and between your family members and you now have connection to this money, you are immediately federally recused from this stuff.
Yes.
Because you're compromised. So I have a very hard time with that one. And everybody tries to do the tap dance on the right of, well, we got to follow rule of law, when the left says, screw the law, we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
an interesting fight.
That's right. Okay. Well, very good. If anybody else has questions, drop them in right now, because we don't get this chance to sit down with Jovan very often, and it's a lot of fun. So go ahead and drop those in. Maybe what we'll do, Jovan, is I want to talk to you about this wild story that's come out of Egypt and the pyramids and what's below the pyramids and how that even ties back into things like Genesis 6:4 and all these other things. Let's get to that in a minute. But first, let me let me put this on the screen because I think this is so cool. There we go. You've written a couple books, and Jovan is not paying me to put this on the screen. I just think they're cool. Here we go. Your Food Forest Bible, and then
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this other one. This is one of your newer ones. You've got a couple new ones. Giant Fruit in Small Spaces.
Yep.
Love that. I want to talk to you about these a little bit, but as I was telling you off air, I'm in the Midwest here, live from America's heartland. We're in the Midwest, and it gets very cold here, and snow and everything else, and negative temperatures and winds and everything else. You've been telling me every time you come on my show, we talk about your gardening techniques, and like I always say, you're just so multifaceted. We can go from politics to gardening, and you're on it. But you told me the last time you came on that I could put together what you call this food forest,
Right.
and I could do it here in the Midwest. I could grow food year round, and I could have fruits and vegetables in the bleak of winter,
Right.
if I do it the way your book says to do it. And I of course believe you that that's true, but it's like, wow, I've never seen that in my life. Your book says how to do it. But then what I did this year, we've got some new trees that we planted, and so I got one of those some of those tree guard shields,
Right.
that you've seen on Shark Tank, and I put those around my trees, and I thought, well, I'm going to try and keep these trees alive this winter. I just took them off, and underneath it, my whole yard is yellow and dark and dead. The grass is. It'll green up here in a little bit, but the whole yard's yellow and dead. I took off the tree guards, and it's like it had its own ecosystem in there.
That's right.
The grass is almost neon green when I took it off. I couldn't believe it.
You created your own little miniature ecosystem and biodome. People sometimes forget that when we think of weather, weather is primarily an atmospheric issue. That means above ground. The Earth, on the other hand, especially if there's global warming, is soaking up all kinds of heat. It's the same reason you can have a fire and the rocks in the fire still be hot 4 or 5 or 6 hours later because they soak in the heat. Well, the Earth actually has that engine power of its thermal density working on it. It's why you can stand in your grass yard barefooted as a kid, but boy, you walk out in the street, it's going to peel the skin off your feet, right? It holds the thermal part of it. Well, you can learn to use these principles of physics and biology, et cetera, geology, in many different ways to control the land or the atmosphere around you. Now, what you're speaking of is you took basically a shield, think of it as a miniature biodome, and all you did was got it close to the thickness of your tree all the way down to the cone on the ground. So what happened is you sheltered that piece of the ground from the atmospherics. So the only thing that came to bear on it was the physical properties of the earth. Well, if you just dig down about 4 to 6 inches in the earth, regardless of how cold it is, you dig down in most places, it's going to be about 70 degrees constant. What you allowed was that patch of land not to be as subject to the atmospheric stuff around it. And what it did is it allowed it to thrive. And that's just a law of the physics and the dynamics of everything. And I'll give you an example. If you can remember, maybe some of you are old enough to remember when they wanted to build the Alaska pipeline, and they said, it's going to kill the caribou and it's going to kill them and they're going to die, all the environmental stuff. Well, what happened is once they got the Alaska pipeline operational, they noticed that the caribou population boomed. Boom. Now, why did the caribou population boom? For 2 reasons. Number one, that pipeline, it's a pretty big pipe, several feet around. It's sheltered immediately underneath it, the ground, from a lot of big direct snow. But the oil moves to the pipeline and it has a heat to it as it's moving. It creates its own thermodynamic heat. Not super high heat, but enough heat. And all throughout those thousands of miles of pipeline, we have 300,000 miles of pipeline here in the United States, and that's just the LP part of it. But it allowed grass to grow year round, which allowed the caribou not to starve off and get so sick during the winter. So they just gathered under the pipelines, and it actually boosted the herds. And that's just the interesting earth properties, right? That you got to understand cause and effect. And I'll give you another example. I just personally think God has it right. So when I wrote these books, I studied food, and I don't want people controlling us, and they're trying to control our food every day. So I tackled the garden. How do you plant it once? That's a food forest, and you can control your destiny. It's a little different than a regular garden. Then I tackled with the one you have on the screen, giant fruit, in small paces, because people don't have the patience to wait 6 years for a fruit tree to produce. And then my most recent one is this one called No Dig, because I hate weeding and digging. And so I did a no dig gardening one just recently, which gives you the shortcuts. But it's how do we use this, what God already told us to do? Because everywhere man has put his hands in and not just relied on God and what's natural common sense, we get messed up. So I'll give you an example. There was an island in maybe somewhere off Japan. I don't 100% know for sure, but the island was infested with rabbits. And the island was becoming dead, right? And because the rabbits were eating up all the grass and stuff. So they got the bright idea that, well, we'll just put a few cats on there and we'll kind of keep the population in check. Well, cats breed as frequently and have as many in a litter as rabbits do. And in one turn of the cycle, you had 2 things happen. The island was still dead because the rabbits ate it all up, but then the cats so much propagated that they wiped out the rabbits, and now they had a land that was infested with cats that ended up starving because there wasn't anything to eat on the island, and the whole island became toxic. But before that, it just, it kind of, they'll kind of balance themselves, right? They'll kind of balance themselves if we just let nature have that battle. So I tend to focus on, you go back to Incan times or Mayan times, and they'll look at a little patch of land and it's got all this crap in it. And archaeologists call it a midden, Midden, and just basically say it's a junkyard. Well, no, it's not. It was basically, even back then, they knew you got to have abundant soil. And so they would take and they would amend their soil, whether it be limestone or shells or ash or leaves or whatever, and they would build up these mounds. They did it for two reasons. It made the ground very warm and it made it very fertile. And they found they could plant that one plot and keep it planted, and they could feed everybody and not have to continually fight back the jungle. And they just have this plot. But science recognized it as a trash bin. And only now are we understanding the concept of what's called black earth. And you go back and look at our ancestors, and they have incredible spots all around the globe for societies that we thought were dumber than a stump, one step up a Cro-Magnon, but they actually knew far more about agriculture and growing and supplying the foods they needed than us. Yeah. And so I tend to go find all that extra research and technology and try to bring it back to life, because I believe God gave us everything. And I just want to see us get off the system. And when I mean get off the system, probably your grandmas or your great grandmas survived the Great Depression because everything they bought was local and they also grew there. We've lost all of that. And that terrifies me, because if we had a major disruption in a country that only has a food supply, our country's food supply is about 10 to 11 days long. That's it. Mm-hmm. And if we ever had a pretty serious problem that would be even worse than COVID and shut it all down, we'd be in trouble. We'd be in serious trouble. And so I'm trying to get people back to the basics, the lost art, which is fascinating. Get your hands in the dirt, get out there and grow. But don't think of it as a task of labor. It's a task of love. And everything started for us in a garden. You got to get back to the garden, get back to the basics. And if you just get back to the gardens and get back to the basics, you will find security, you will find peace, and you'll find that connection with the earth that we all naturally have that we've lost. It's been replaced.
Yeah, we have lost it. And I love that. And even things like I'm discovering, and none of us are the same people we were 20 years ago. And, 20 years ago, I was, pretty focused on, let's just get to work and let's go work in our offices and put on our suits and do all this stuff and go to our fluorescent box that we work in. And, I'm now discovering just the immense value of getting out in sunlight. Not that I'm some sort of recluse, but the power of vitamin D from sunlight, the power of barefoot grounding on the earth, all of those things, we've totally lost those.
That's right. That simple act of taking off your shoes and going out to the grass and firmly planting the feet on the ground and visualizing it's all connected, and you're going all across this country and you're going back home or you're going to your grandparents' place, all in your mind, of course, just kind of reconnects you and revitalizes you. And it's very important, because I think what many people feel, and they'll describe it as a disconnect, but they can't describe what the disconnect is. And the disconnect is that we have a great, gracious creator out there that always wants our attention, but we've turned our attention to other places.
Yeah. And I guess I used to think of it as just like, okay, these are some hippie tree huggers out there. And maybe there's some element of that, but it's real. I mean, you take your shoes off, you get grounding on the earth for 30 minutes out in a bright sunny day, if you can find it without chemtrails. And it's the real deal. It's not hocus pocus hippie stuff. I mean, it can be that, there can be elements of that, but it's maybe the way we were created.
Well, look, you can love church, but you can still go to a church and have a damn fanatic Bible thumper that ruins it for everybody. All segments have their ruiners that take it to the extreme or abuse it. But yes, connecting with what we really are, right? We're better. Like if you were to look at, it may be Norway, but in Norway, a big part of their daycare, even in cold winter months, is they'll take the kids out of the daycare into the play yard and they play in mud puddles. Mm-hmm. Why do they play in mud puddles? Because it's not only the connection to the earth, they also realize they're boosting your immune system, and they have less of the issues we have in an environment that can be very harsh, because they let the kids play in the mud.
Yeah. And what about hospitals that used to have a sun deck?
That's right.
Yeah. How about that? All right. Well, cool stuff. Jovan, hold that book up one more time. And maybe real quick, I know I flashed it on the screen from Amazon. I'll put all the links down below so people can find these easily.
This one is for it's called No Dig Gardening. And this is how even it also in bad weather areas where you don't have growing seasons, it also talks about extending your growing season. So this one's a very simple. It's just for, what we call Make Life Easier series.
Perfect.
It's just called No Dig, No Weed and Gardening. Then for you that are really into fruit trees, this is how not only you can plant fruit trees, but you can turn it into a really creative passion. But more importantly, I teach how you can hack them. And you can take that fruit tree that you put in the ground, and 6 months later, it's producing abundant fruit instead of 6 years later. And then the first one that kind of started the series, and I got several more coming, was the Food Forest Bible. I tend to do, they're more expensive and they're all very colorful books with tons of art. But this one is how to plant a food forest. It's different than a garden, but it's plan, Plan, and then plant. And what you should know is the longest operational food garden in the world has been feeding a community because it was planted in the food forest nature, and it's been feeding that same community for 4,000 years. And when you think of gardens, that's not what you think of planting it and it's going to feed me for 4,000 years, much less 4 months. And so it's going back to techniques that was lost to us because we got away from gardening. We let other people do it for us. Now we've let the government take it over and look at the crap they're feeding us. It's take care of yourself, get back, save your family through food security.
Yeah. And that's why I love your book so much, because like I said, it's normal that you would think living here in the Midwest and when you go through winters that, okay, I can grow a garden, but only in the summer. So if we're going to have a collapse or a crisis, let's just hope it hits during the summer months. But you tell us actually how we can grow that year round. So I think that's so
absolutely
cool and transformational.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll put the links to those down below so you can find them on Amazon. And I know people are always very interested in those. All right. Well, I want to talk about the pyramids a little bit, if you don't mind, and if you have time.
Not at all. Make time. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is so fun. This story broke a couple days ago, and let me just put this up on the screen here. Here we go. There we go. I'm biased, but this is our website, and I'm just going to use this because it has a lot of pictures that I want to use. And Jovan, I stole your thumbnail because I thought it was so good. I hope you don't mind, but
not a problem. Thank you.
we linked your show in here too. But this is fascinating stuff. Let me just lay the groundwork for anybody that hasn't seen it, and then I want to let you take it away. You did a whole show on this recently, and I've got so much going on. I don't get to catch all of your shows, but I did catch this one, and it was just so good. And it lined up with what we had just published here in this article. And then here, I'll show this too. Share this tab instead. Here's the New York Post with the same news. So this is going mainstream, I guess, right. if you want to use that word. This is not. It started. I think the story broke. Alex Jones was one of the first to talk about it. So you got people saying, it's fake news because it's Alex Jones. Well, I got news for you. Number one, that guy's been right about a lot more than he's been wrong over the years.
Sure has.
And number two, he's quoting sources and studies from people that are pretty credible. So we'll talk about all that in a minute, but let me just show you some of these pictures. So basically what the claim is I think let's go to this one. This is the picture that Alex Jones shared, but what they did was they've got this new, at least as the story and the report and the study goes, they've got this new ground penetrating radar, some new tech. It's probably other stuff other than that, but just to simplify it a bit, that can look beneath the surface, many, many layers deep, not just 5 feet or 10 feet, but it can go deep and scan what's underneath there. And basically what the study said is they're finding these giant pillars underneath the pyramids that might look something like this.
Yeah, that's a scale. That's a scale to show you. If you look at the pyramid on top, what you're looking at underneath is a scale. The pyramids are massive. Now you take that same pyramid and you go just under the sand. You could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're showing you the scale of how deep this goes under the surface.
Yeah, stunning. I mean, just absolutely stunning. Then another. This is obviously an artist depiction, but they're finding what they believe are these pillars, and then some cylindrical pillars that have these coils allegedly wrapped around them. They happen to look a lot like a Tesla coil. This is the Tesla drawing from Nikola Tesla. Here's a couple more pictures. Where's the other one that I really like? Right here. Here's a rendition of the pillars with these coils, which look a lot like these electroculture gardening rods, which are almost identical. And it's, it all dates back to Tesla, not Elon's Tesla, but Nikola Tesla, and his idea that you could pull basically free energy out of the ether. So anyway, this is all coming out. Let me just kick it over to you, Jovan. You did a whole show on this, but your basic message, I think, is, hey, don't discount this as fake news so fast. There might be something here.
Right. I'll give you an example. If I just had to ask you off the top of your head, without looking, don't look, how many pyramids are in Egypt? What would be your number?
Well, I think there are like the 3 big ones and then a lot of copies. I don't know, 10, 12, something like that.
There are 100 known pyramids in Egypt.
Okay.
Okay. So let's just get random here. How many pyramids are in China?
I don't know.
400.
Wow. South America?
In the hundreds.
Antarctica?
Now, in the hundreds. The issue you have here is always been the battle between what has now become the science and what has become accreditation or academia. And here's where it starts. Long time ago, there was a fellow by the name of Heinrich Schliemann. And when his father would read him Homer's Odyssey, the Iliad, and all this other stuff, and this little German boy, his dad's a grocer, is listening to these stories, he always thought as a kid, there's just too much detail here for these to be just fanciful BS.
Yes.
Right? And so Heinrich Schliemann, after he had become very successful, he sold his grocery store chain. He basically became an explorer. Okay. Now, this is where I get my rap of when you have them referred to me as a treasure hunter, they don't tell you I had retired, and they don't tell you I was trekking the globe, tracking down these lost cities. Right. They kind of use it as a slight. But Heinrich Schliemann used his wealth, and he was traveling to go because he always wanted answers about ancient Troy, the Homer's Odyssey, the Iliad, etc. And so he went hunting. And in his hunting through ancient Greece and other things, he made magnificent discoveries of civilizations that should not be there. And this is what we now know as the Mycenaean culture, etc. So it was Schliemann who actually created a lot of the methods that are now used in archaeology of here's how you read the contour of the land, here's how you excavate stuff, here's where you found it, here's where you read the signs, etc. So he's actually the father of archaeology. Now, what's interesting is archaeologists to this day don't like the mention of Heinrich Schliemann being the father of archaeology. Do you know why? Because he doesn't have a degree in archaeology. Now, here's the guy that literally beget the profession, the impetus of really where England took this and ran with it and go, hey, we could make something of this and it could be a profession. It was just the gentleman's back in the day. But they like to ignore him because, well, he didn't have an archaeology degree, of course. Now, in that, we now have this interesting phenomenon going on. Archaeology doesn't have a lot of money anymore. It used to be a noble profession at the universities, but the universities split. Now, if we were to go back to the late 1800s, universities were primarily heavily driven Christian institutions. You didn't go to an institution to get a law degree where it was just a law degree. You had a law and theology degree at the same time. Everything was biblically based.
Yeah, right.
Well, there was this great split that happened. And the split was when you get this separation, church and state crap, where they pushed religion one way and you have these academic institutions that were left over. Well, what happened is all of a sudden they started realizing that things being discovered around the world were actually codifying the Bible.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Right? That they were actually proving what you've been taught in ancient scripture, in the Bible and other issues, other treatises and scripts, etc., was absolutely true. It was virtue. It was truth. It was codified. Well, academia hated that, and so for 100+ years or more, actually, academia has pirated archaeology that if it doesn't meet peer review of academia, it's never going to see the light of day. And so there's all these fantastic discoveries out there. Now, there's a little bit of a cheat. If you were to go somewhere in the United States and find something fantastical, you don't get credit for discovering it. You would have to go to the state. You would have to tell the state archaeologist where it is. The state archaeologist will go there to investigate it. The first thing they do is lock you out. Then they do a study, and lo and behold, 5 years later, this great archaeologist made this discovery. It's really a rigged system, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's going on right now is technology has superseded academia institution, meaning there's no limits. It doesn't come from behind the walls of academia. And now we have technology tools to not only find these things, we have the technology tools to know what we're looking at and vet them. So what you're seeing right now is a really interesting renaissance where archaeology is realizing they're going to be left behind. So they're now starting to embrace the things that they used to wholeheartedly reject because they know they're going to be left behind. Now, as part of this, people have to understand you've been taught your entire life that the Egyptians built the pyramids. If you were in, quote unquote, the business and exploration like myself and deep research, you would know that's a lie. It's not true. In the Egyptian archives, they basically talk about that they excavated the pyramids from the great sands. It means they discovered them. They did not make them, they discovered them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at the Great Sphinx and stuff, you realize that on these massive rock structures, which is primarily quartzite, which is very hard, different types of porphyry stones, very, very hard, but it has linear striations around it, which shows massive water damage. Well, that only happens with great floods and abrasion. And so even that had to be excavated. So you can go back to Napoleon's era and you can look at old expedition photos and drawings, and you'll actually see that it was Napoleon that actually excavated the Sphinx and got that going. Well, what's going on right now is because technology can peer into places that, like, the people in the Middle East that have now turned it into their culture. Yeah, we're Egyptian. We built the pyramids. It's our tourism. I don't blame them. They're trying to, keep a business running.
Mm-hmm.
But now, and they won't let anybody inside. They won't let real research be done. But now, because you can peer from space and you can do things with cool technology, you're finally able to see the things that heretofore had been hidden and unseen.
Mm-hmm.
And in part of this, we're discovering many different things that we thought about our society or whatever are just absolutely not true. There are, you know why Memphis, Tennessee is the sister city of Memphis in Egypt? Because if you go right across the bridge in Memphis, what they obscure is a pyramid. People don't, and I'm not talking about the Hard Rock Pyramid. It's actually on the other side where everything's built up. They discovered a pyramid there. A lot of this stuff has been hidden. And our government has done through different times some very nefarious deeds where they brought people in back in the 1930s to investigate stuff in the Tennessees, and damned if it wasn't an Egyptian hall of worship right here in the United States of America. Well, that was very controversial. So what did they do? They built a dam and they put it all underwater. They flooded it so nobody could ever see it again. That's the issue of manifest destiny, because they don't want any challenges to land. Well, this has been going on for a
Wait,
very
wait,
long time.
where was that one, Jovan?
That particular one's under the Tennessee Water Valley Authority.
Wow. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right. I look, I had my run-in with academia, and I'll explain this one to you. I'm looking at these old archives before they flooded the place, and I see this design that kept on appearing in the land. And it looked like if you had a deer hide stretched out, you know how it's got arms and legs and it's got a hide. Well, that's called an ox hide. You could actually look it up online, ox hide. And I'd always been saying, look, over in the Bronze Age, during, you know, what you would know as the Pharaonic times, pre-Ptolemaic, you know, you're talking Cleopatra and all that stuff. Most of all of their implements were bronze and copper, but the copper doesn't exist there. Remember, to make bronze, you need copper and you need tin and zinc. Well, so there's always been this question, where are the ancient copper mines of the ancient Middle East? Well, those copper mines are in Michigan. And we have massive mines in the United States of America of pure copper. I've seen pieces of pure copper that are the size of an RV. Well, in Michigan, you have massive ancient copper mines where billions of pounds of copper are gone. But you know what we don't have in the United States? Copper artifacts.
Oh.
We got flint arrowheads. We got stone implements. We've got billions of pounds of copper mined on our land. We don't have any societal structure where we're finding copper artifacts. You don't find copper artifacts, right? But you find them all over the Middle East.
Wow.
And so as I'm digging through these journals and I find out about this thing where maybe there was a pharaoh type temple here, I start to dig in and I come across this oxhide shape. And it was either an oxhide or a bun. Think of a bowl, right?
Okay.
If you filled a bowl level, they call that a bun.
Okay.
And then an oxhide. Well, as I dug deeper in the journals, I came across these archaeology guys saying, we discovered all of these altars where they were worshiping the gods and sacrificing. So I got to looking at their definition of an altar. Now, their criteria for an altar was vitrification. It means you can actually prove the ground was charred. You follow me? And so they had all of these little designs, consistent oxides, and they were all charred, but they were in the ground and they were about 2 inches tall. So I'm going, you know, because that's the only way you can get a discovery through. It's an altar. It's a sacrifice. They were blood sacrificing people, the natives. And I basically told the guys, you're full of shit. And I said, let me tell you what this is. And so I took all the old drawings, because this is underwater now. We scanned them in 3D. And I found out, one, yes, they were on the ground. Two, what it was not an altar, because you don't kneel to a 1 inch or 2 inch altar on the ground and pray. It was a mold. Well, what do you do when you melt copper? You heat it, you melt it, you pour it into a mold. We've all seen it. How did they make molds then? Rocks and or the ground. And when they pour it in, what does it do? It heats up the ground. And so I track down by dimensions all of these sizes and do my deep research work. And I go, son of a bitch, I know where this is. And so they had just discovered, and we're talking about what was called Ulu Buru, an Ulu Buru wreck, which was a Phoenician ship that was servicing Turkey. And it's mega times. It's even before, you know, like the Iliad or Odysseus stuff. We're talking way back in prehistory. And they discovered this shipwreck. And in this ancient shipwreck, I was able to verify and prove a few things, which caused a shit stir. That number one, that copper came from Michigan. Why? Because it has this particular pure quotient in the copper. And copper only that pure comes from Michigan. By
Wow.
the way, you see these designs, you can look it up right now, Uluburin Rec. You can see the little oxides, you can see the buns. I found every one of the molds that were documented up and down the Mississippi, right? All through that Tennessee River Valley. And so they were taking it from Michigan. They were bringing the raw copper down Mississippi. They would refine it, put it into these things, and they were shipping it over to Pharaohs, right? See if you can see the Uluburin Rec. Find an oxide. You can just type in oxide ingot. And so I proved that these ingots, hang on, right there. Okay, see the top left one? Oh, wait, top right over to the second to the last. Click on that one. That's called an oxide. See how it looks like a skin stretched out? Well, that copper came from Michigan. And the reason it's that 1 inch thick is because that's how they poured it into the ground to make it. Why does it have 4 little handles on it? Because it's heavy, so they could carry it. Now, see that photo to your left where it looks like a cartoon drawing with guys in it? Click on that one. That's the Uluburin wreck. It was all down in the bottom of this wreck. I tracked every piece of copper and the size and tracked it back to the original mold here in the United States. So it created a shit stir with archaeology because I said this was the copper that filled the Bronze Age and we had ancient mariners. Well, that was a no, not allowed. And the next level of my research, which I didn't get to do, is if you go back to the oxide, is, and just you should do your back arrow. If you look at the oxide, it has little dirt pimples on it. I told you, and this is where they stopped me. I said, I'll tell you what, you see those little pimples? That's gravel and dirt. Allow me to break one of those pustules, and I'll absolutely guarantee you that dirt signature matches these places.
Wow.
It's trapped in there. So it created a controversy. Now, why did it create a controversy? Because, well, it's not archaeology, and we had to have an ancient land. An ancient man wasn't sailing. They couldn't do that. So the only reason I bring that up is everything you ever know about history is wrong. And I've spent, I retired. I was out of it. And I traveled the world doing this type of stuff. And this is why they referred to me as a treasure hunter. I'm not a treasure hunter. I was a history hunter. And this stuff is in the Middle East, one of the most famous wrecks in the world of the ancient world. And all of that stuff, including the timber for the ships, came from Michigan. Right? But this is how much has been kept from us. But what's going on right now with the pyramids is because we have technology, and that's what I use primarily, I can 3-dimension these things and show these things. They're having a hard time disputing it. And so as this continues to happen, we're going to find there's a lot about our planet we never knew. Even if you were looking at some of the ancient blocks that are different places around the world, you'll see them like on Ancient Aliens, the H blocks or whatever that fit and interlock. There's a reason for that. Now, here's the bottom line why science stays away from it. Because it talks about, in the Bible, it talks about this. And in the Bible, it says King Solomon's riches came from the ancient land of Myrrh. Well, where's the ancient land of Myrrh? Where all the riches came from. And they don't want that known because they want you to think we're all disconnected, not connected. They want you to think we were all savages before we were traveling the world, right? And only modern man is worthy. And it's not true. We've lost more history than we've ever learned. And so there has been a concerted effort to hide this, but now technology is breaking through, and this is where it comes from. This is why I catch a lot of my trolls for me come up from the archaeology circles, because I basically tell them, you spent $300,000 for your education, and you might as well just wipe your ass with that piece of paper because it's not worth it because you're not allowed to teach the truth. Now, for me, it doesn't change anything. It just means we have a great, wonderful, fantastic world, and there's a lot more we need to learn. So I spent a large portion of my life in these ancient archives and stuff. But I do believe that if we were allowed to look, we would find out we have everything we need to survive. We do not need electrical grid like we have now. They only did it this way so they can charge us monthly. But we could actually all set ourselves free from it. But they've captured us in a cycle of slavery via consumerism.
Okay, I have about 1 million questions. I don't know which way I want to take it. But let me do this one really quick based on what you just said. Free energy, Nikola Tesla, don't need the electric grid potentially as we have it. And then you have what I believe is proven to be 100% true, that President Trump's uncle is the guy who ended up with all of Tesla's research papers and drawings. that there's just no way that's a coincidence, right?
I've heard that. I've never been able to verify it. And since I cannot verify it, I have no way to comment. I've heard the same thing and I've heard the same people say it, but I really haven't been able to dig into that one to completely codify it. But
Got
yes, Nikola Tesla, and you got to go back, and I talked about this on the one program maybe you saw me do, is there was this battle between Tesla and Edison.
Yeah.
Tesla was really the brain. Edison was a notorious, he'd steal ideas and put his name on it. Edison was trying to sell electricity like we know today, that if you touch it, it'll kill you dead. And they used to demonstrate it by killing elephants, walking into the wire and it'd fry them. And Tesla said it doesn't have to be that way. And you can generate power from the earth. But nobody wanted something that you could just build a tower and everybody gets free power off of it. They wanted something you had to plug into and consume. And it's why we got the diesel gas wars, and they killed Rudy Diesel by throwing him over a ship. Same thing. Many men of great power over time have always tried to make sure they keep mankind in servitude and on the, I call it the system or the government tit, and not let you set yourself free.
Yeah, that's spot on. Okay. So following up on this a little bit, boy, we could do a whole 3-hour show just on this. So we won't be able to hit all of it, but everything you just laid out, and you even talked about this guy that founded archaeology and saw all the detail and
Heinrich Schliemann.
Schliemann, he found all the detail, compelling in some of these ancient books that read more like a historical novel than fiction. Right. It's always fascinated me too. And, it's kind of like the whole hippie thing with the grounding. For a long time, none of this stuff interested me at all. And then, the more I've grown, the more I realize, well, this is foundational to who we are and why we're here. And it actually doesn't contradict the Bible. It actually is all spelled out in the Bible. We'll get to that in just a minute, maybe. But,
correct.
So then the more I look at it, you look around, why are there pyramids? I mean, you brought this up. We didn't talk about it much, but there are hundreds of pyramids on every continent out there, or maybe every continent.
Yes.
How does that happen? How does the copper get from Michigan back over to the Middle East? And then you start looking at some of these drawings that they have in these caves and all the other archaeology. They're drawing the same objects and the same creatures on all of these continents, and it almost lines up perfectly. You start comparing them. So you're telling me someone down in South Africa or South America was drawing an image of a creature or of a thing, and they're drawing the same thing up here with the Native American Indians, and they're drawing the same thing over in Europe. And
when I started outing a bunch of this stuff, I used to do a program called Forbidden History, and I'm talking about these things with people, and archaeologists would admonish me, "You're not an archaeologist." And I said, "Look, you can study my work in 165 major universities. Where's your stuff studied?" I said, "I don't need an archaeology degree to connect the dots. This is pure research." And then they would say, like the Michigan copper, their excuse became, when I said, "Look, it wasn't natives mining the copper." They say, "Well, the natives mined the copper." And I say, "Well, just show me the artifacts. We're talking billions of pounds. Where did they go?" Their answer was, "You're just racist against natives."
Yes.
You're an idiot. Anyway, yeah. So I fought these things, but there's some really amazing discoveries out there. See, I personally think if you've ever seen the movie Mad Max, or any of them, Fury Road, any of them, doesn't matter what it is, but you understand that civilization, for whatever reason, primarily got wiped out and we had to kind of start all over again. Or if you're looking at, Thunderdome and Mad Max and the kids are telling the stories. Well, that's actually true. When I mean true, we've been here and done this before. We've been obliterated many times over and had to come back. And that's the pieces of what the archaeological record shows. It doesn't really change anything. It's just the pieces of what it shows. But there's always a benefit to many people to hide it. But if you were to look at some of the discoveries out there, like one of the most interesting discoveries was a piece of fashioned chain, gold chain, and a bell. And it was found in a coal mine. Okay, so we're talking several thousand feet down below in the earth in a coal mine. Now, I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying. It was not a random bell or gold chain found in a coal mine. It was miners chopping out coal.
Okay.
And in this coal, as the coal fell out rolls this bell. Wasn't just laying in a coal mine. It came out of the coal. Same with this chain. When this discovery came forward, archaeology, it was a hoax, fake news, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they finally had to issue a statement, here's their statement. Well, there must have been a hole up top that a Native American came in, and when they walked by, they dropped the bell down it. Now, that's a true explanation for it,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, sure, sure.
Or you find, like I'm doing exploration in Canada, and at this ancient port, which I'm proving an ancient port, we find a hoard of Carthaginian coins, gold coins from ancient Carthage, which is North Africa, which is this mariner thing there. Archaeology's explanation is, well, that dropped from somebody's pocket. Well, the first thing I have to tell them is they were found 10 inches deep. Well, but that dropped from somebody's pocket. And I said, let me get this straight. There are people walking around the world that carry 2,000-year-old gold coins in their pocket. And when they're on vacation, they just kind of drop through a hole in their pocket and then make their way into the ground. And that's your explanation. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff they do out there. Another one, which is a very interesting one, is a marble quarry. And they're cutting, if you've ever seen a marble quarry, they cut the sheets, they cut out a big block and then they shave it into sheets.
Okay.
Well, as they're cutting down this ancient quarry, and sorry for all my scratching, I was doing farm work all this weekend, so I was on tractors and trees and whatever. I just noticed it on my arm.
Nasty.
Yeah. But we're in this quarry. As they go down, they hit a layer of sand. Now, it's not uncommon to hit a sand pocket in a limestone or quartz core. You can hit sand pockets. But when they cleaned out these sand pockets and got it cleaned out, now remember, they're cutting down progressively over years. Big old blocks. You've seen it. Big, like white box of like a quartz countertop. They're cutting it out and they whatever. They finally get down and they cut and they hit sand, and there's many feet of sand. And so they kind of clean it out to see how far the pocket goes. And when they clean out the pocket, they find cut marble pillars. And pretty archaic tools. So it all comes down to I believe we have lost more technology than we know. If you look at Pimapuku, am I saying that right? Let me make sure I got that right. Pumapuco. If you look at Pumapuco, and you can look that one up, you see an H block at Pumapuco, right? Which is in the Quechan Desert, right? It's called the Gate of the Puma. If you were to look at those blocks on your screen at Pumapuco, those blocks are cut to a certain tolerance, and they fit together. And that's something that's see that H block on the top left? They're thousands of years old. That's a wildly advanced technology, but they all fit together.
Yeah.
Also, and that's all buried. You see to the left there, that kind of pyramid. That pyramid had the top cut off, and it's all underground. You can't see it because age has gone on it. But they have all kinds of designs at Pumapuco, which I believe you can see lines and chambers and cogs and all kinds of stuff. I submit to people, when you look at a lot of these stones that have just weird designs in them, I actually think they're a parts mold, where if you poured metal into them and you pop them out, I think those metal parts, oh yeah, come on, man, they fell out of somebody's pocket. I think if you poured metal in them, it would fashion parts, and you could put those parts together.
Yeah.
Now, ancient history in the Mahabharata, which is the Indian side of ancient history, much smaller, tells us that they had vimanas, flying machines, and all this other stuff. Archaeology has called it shit. Well, they just now discovered that ancient road that links India. I've known about it for probably 30 years. I've always wanted to dive it, but it's in the most tiger shark, hammerhead shark infested area in the world. But now archaeology can't hide it anymore, and they're trying to get ahead of it and acknowledge it. So I tell you, there's a ancient part of the earth and history that's prehistory that we're not allowed to learn. But the main reason we're not allowed to learn it is because it's the men of old and the stuff of old that are talked about in the Bible. And they're not going to do anything that proves that that document is sacred and authentic.
Yeah. Well, and I want to pull that up in just a minute. I'm glad you went there. But, some of these H blocks or some of these other things, it's been a while since I've looked into it, but I remember looking into the Great Pyramid or whatever they call it, the big one. And
they call it Khufu's pyramid. And the reason they call it Khufu, that Khufu did it during his reign, is because when they went up into the stone room, somebody had graffitied on the wall Khufu.
Yeah.
Like Kilroy was here. That's the only reason why they attributed it to Khufu.
So it could be him, or it could just be graffiti.
Yes.
But anyway, that one, if you look at some of the details, and I don't have any of them off the top of my head, but something like 20 different details on this thing are the pieces fit together so refined that people have admitted if we wanted to build that thing today, we don't have the technology with all of our equipment. We could not replicate anything nearly that eloquent as what that pyramid is.
Well, it's even more than that. If you were to look at the great stones of Baalbek, and right now, if you looked at our earth moving equipment, our single largest earth mover can move at any one time, can move about 70 tons. And so that's 70 increments of 2,000 pounds. A ton is 2,000 pounds. But if you look at the ancient stones of Baalbek, and you realize that, instead of being 140,000 pounds, they have something that's 1.3 million pounds, and somehow they picked them up and stacked them on each other perfectly. Well, we have no equipment to this day that can do that.
Mm-hmm.
We also don't have the physics. People don't understand the magnification of physics. If you went to the Great Pyramids and those are stones of Baalbek right there on the right, and you can see how small the man is, and they just get bigger and bigger, but they're stacked stones. If you went to the pyramids when they were still faced, they used to be shiny and still faced.
Yeah.
And you could take a piece of paper and you could slide it between the blocks. If you could fit a piece of paper there, by the time you got to the crest of the pyramid, that if it was off the tolerance of a sheet of paper, by the time you got to the top, the point wouldn't meet, and you could set something about the size of a Ford Explorer down in that gap because it just won't align.
Yeah.
Because it keeps on multiplying. But of course, that's not how the pyramids are built. They fit, just like you're seeing Baalbek, right? There is no reason these should exist. And us, in our hubris, basically poo-poo it. Archaeology says, well, it's this, and they rolled them on wood. Well, number one, you can't take something 1.3 million pounds and roll it on any logs of any distance anyway, turn it into sawdust. And so this shit y'all use to try to explain this stuff, we have to grasp there was something here at a time much more ancient than us. And frankly, I think it's time for all of us to learn that we are greatness. God created greatness. We came from greatness. And sometimes we take our greatness and we do stupid things and we obliterate each other. That's why we need to learn this lesson, so we learn from history and don't do it again.
Well, and so where it really gets interesting to me is all these things that we just put up on the screen. I mean, they're out there, they're objective. You can go look at them, and then you're like, okay, well, then how does this fit in? And well, gosh, why doesn't the Bible tell us anything about this? And it turns out it's all over the place in the Bible.
That's right. It's all over the place.
So, I mean, this is where people usually go: Genesis 6, 1-4, even 1-5. But this is you'll never hear this read in church on a Sunday because the pastors just don't know what to do with it. But it's right there.
That's right.
You've got the mighty men of old, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Well, who is that?
That's right.
Afterward, and then the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. Well, in the Old Testament, sons of God is always refers to divine beings, angelic beings, whatever language you want to use on that.
Bene Elohim.
Bene Elohim. And so then they have, imagine if you take an angel or a divine being, a son of God, and you somehow mix them up with the human woman and you have children, they're probably going to be maybe huge, maybe,
right.
The mighty men. And it says these people became the heroes of old, the men of renown.
Right.
So, and then what do you get the entire rest of the Old Testament? You get everybody going out and trying to wipe out all these giant clans. And so all of a sudden, then instead of that trips up a lot of people, because people say, well, gosh, I read the Old Testament and it's just one war after another. God's siding with Israel and he's wiping out all these other things. That seems really unfair and racist or whatever else. But you put it in this context, they're trying to clean up the bloodline. They're trying to wipe out these Nephilim hybrid
They're
creatures.
trying to wipe out the bloodline. I can take you inside the Vatican. In fact, I can show you Vatican documents released. It's called the Popol Vuh. And in the Popol Vuh, I can show you accounts in Mesoamerica, right, which you now know as Mexico, where the natives were having problems with giants raiding the crops.
Mm-hmm.
Giants raiding the crops in the cornfields. And the natives had drawings of them, and you would look at it, and sure enough, it's like Jack and the Beanstalk type of giants, and it takes 20 locals to tie them up, and you got 20 on the line here, you got 20 on the line here, you got a couple of them spearing him, and
that's right,
and opening his guts because they're trying to kill him because he's wiping out the crops.
Yeah. So what is that? Where's that?
Yeah. And so there's accounts of these things, but when the church came through, they were freaked out about it, and all of this got hidden and sequestered. That was part of the Dark Ages, sucking up everything that was ever learned. So a lot of this stuff has been sequestered because they just felt it wasn't fit for mankind to know, for two reasons. One is hiding history, but two is, mankind, even at the church level, has always decided you've got to go through them. You've got to pray our way, or you've got to be our way. And if anything kind of made it look like you had a more direct path to God, they hid it because they want you to go through them, because it is all about controlling mankind.
Yeah. And what I find is the more you dig into this and you start to uncover some of this hidden history or even hidden Bible stuff that you've never been taught, everything starts to make a lot more sense. I mean, what do you get immediately after verse 4? You have these Nephilim that are on the earth, and because they're these hybrid mix of sons of God and daughters of men, what do you get immediately in the next verse? Everything has been turned wickedness, and every inclination is evil all the time. So then what do you get right below that? Noah and the flood. Oh, right. Okay. This makes perfect sense.
They had to wipe them out. They said exactly what was going on. They had to wipe it out.
I mean, just look at the screen, everybody. It's all here in one chapter. Chapter 6. It all makes sense. But no one reads what happens before the flood. It's just, oh well, that was kind of weird. Now we have a rainbow, and isn't this great? But it seems arbitrary and vengeful and mean until you read what happened before it, and then maybe there's a grand plan, and it makes a lot of sense. So just fascinating stuff. You get to even, I'll just throw one more on the screen to get everybody thinking. You can even read Psalm 82, and now this is a really interesting one. Here you have look at verse number 1. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. Well, that's interesting. There's all these sons of God again.
Capital G versus small g.
Yes, and so God, the YHWH, he's clearly the one in control, clearly different than all the others. But you've got a whole divine council up there, and so these people, these other gods, they, where did all the chaos in the earth come from? Where do you get all of this other God worship in the Old Testament? People didn't just create that out of thin air. You didn't just get the Egyptians having the same pantheon as the Greeks, as the people before them. They all have these exact same pantheons, just different names that they give them.
Right.
Well, probably they didn't just imagine that. It probably came from somewhere.
Right. It's the same. It harks back to you talking about the same hieroglyphs, ideograms, or petroglyphs being all around the globe. But archaeology describes it as, well, that was just spontaneous. Everybody came up with the same idea at once, which is crap. It's telling of a more ancient history. It's always been out there, and they've just tried to control it. I think the main thing in a lot of this control, to me, it comes down very simple. If, in fact, you truly, 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 truly came to the point that you realize God is real, and the laws, like in the 10 Commandments, are immutable. You cannot corrupt them and should not corrupt them. Then you kind of understand where local governments and man-made laws really seem like a crock of crap to control you. And it's always been this thing. We've got to control people. We're here to save you. When in fact, no, they're not here to save us. They're not here to make it better. They only complicate it. And what's going on is we're repeating this man-made cycle once again.
Yeah. I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
That's right. That's right.
It never ends well. Never ends well. Well, that is fascinating. Boy, like I said, we could probably do another 3 hours on that, but we'll leave that there. One last thing, if you have time,
Sure,
Jovan.
sure.
One other thing that and I'm just so interested to get your opinion on this. And if you don't have an opinion, that's fine. But one other thing that you mentioned in that show that you did recently on Egypt and the pyramids is you touched on something that has really perplexed me a lot in recent years, and it's basically just the growing hatred for the Jewish people. And
Yes.
you mentioned that, and I mean, we can definitely see that is on the rise. That's extremely troubling. If you're going to look at the Bible as your source of truth and frame everything else in there, you see God very clearly picks Israel and says he's going to see them through to the end. And then there's the verses about he will bless those who bless Israel. And so that's all in there. So you kind of have to start there. But
if you can destroy Israel, you can destroy God. If you can destroy Israel, you can destroy the word of God that basically uses the term chosen people. I don't want people to think that means super special or anything like that. It basically means a case study of God here for people. And if you realize that if you can be made to turn away from the Jewish people, if they can convince you, or the government's run by Israeli spies and they're all bad guys and Jews are evil, if they can get you to that point, and remember, for years I was calling out anti-Semitic stuff's on the rise, and then of course we got October 7th and the slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what they did is they started a propaganda war telling you Jews were bad. So when they pulled off October 7th and murdered so many people, you would basically think the people of Israel deserved it. And you got to remember, that's a very key pillar to fall, because they've already been taking God out of schools, God out of books, God out of government, God out of education. If they can get you to believe that the ancient people that you've come to know as Jews, right, Hebrews, which are all the patriarchs in your own very Bible, that if they can get you to dismiss the Jews, then all that permanently left is God, because that also eliminates Jesus, because Jesus is a Jew. And so they work really hard on the spinning myth to get people to cleave away from the Jewish people. When you cleave away from the Jewish people and you don't understand it's a very important part of your heritage and who you are in our nation as Judeo-Christians, they are now at that point, if they can get it successfully done, one step away from terminating God in your life forever. And that is the grand plan of evil that they're working on. And people don't realize it, because I even see people who profess they're patriots or profess they're Christians and are coming out with this evil Jewish rhetoric, and they don't understand. When you turn around and say the Jews are evil, they're all evil people, when God tells you something different, you understand at the basis level, they've also made you turn away from God and go directly against God, which means they can make God fall from your lips completely. It is a horrific battle that's underway.
Yeah, and that's so well said. So here's the question I want to ask you with to kind of follow up on that, because I see everything that you just said, and like I said, I start with the foundation that that's very clear in the Bible that Israel is special and God has picked them, and He said He's going to see them through to the very end, and all of those things. And so you have to start there, and you have to say, undoubtedly, that foundational layer is true. But what I wonder is you do then you also at the same time you have this rising level of hatred growing, and you're like, well, where is that coming from? And here's a theory I want to throw out to you, and you can tell me if this is just totally bonkers or if it makes sense. Everything Satan does is he takes and distorts whatever God has done, right?
Correct.
And that's been his game plan all along. And so it feels to me and it looks to me, because you do see things like, you got Thomas Massey in Congress railing against AIPAC, and you're like, well, why do we have AIPAC, and why is an AIPAC representative assigned to every U.S. representative? That does seem a little strange. You do have things like,
well, hold on. Do you think AIPAC's the only one that has that? Every pharmaceutical company
Absolutely.
has somebody assigned to them. Every funding organization for USAID that's getting funding has somebody assigned to them.
100%.
Every person to destroy America doing it nefariously has somebody assigned to them.
Yep. No doubt. So that's one thing. Let me just add to the rest of the list. You look around, and I guess my question is, it says in the Bible that the wheat and the tares will rise up together in the end, and then eventually be separated. Is it possible that we have the authentic biblical people of Israel, and then we also have this Rothschild created nation state of Israel that was created in 1947 or whenever it was? And is it possible we have kind of a counterfeit group claiming to be Jews, claiming to be Israelites? I mean, you even have in the Bible, Jesus says to the Pharisees, he says, you brood of vipers, he calls them evil, the Pharisees.
Right.
In Revelation, yes. And he says,
and the Sadducees
and the Sadducees,
it was Jews who killed.
Yep. And so, but
other Jew named Jesus.
Yes. And so, but even back then, he's calling out groups of them and saying, well, you're not Jews. I mean, John 8:44, he says, you are of your father, the devil. There's no truth in you. And so he's calling out these people. You've got Revelation talks about in the end times, or well, either end times or it's the first century churches, but there's references to Jews who say they are Jews, but they're actually from the synagogue of Satan. I guess my question is it possible that Satan has corrupted and distorted this?
Who's from the synagogue of Satan? Give me that quote.
Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9.
And it says they're from what?
It says, I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan.
Okay. And what version of the Bible are you reading?
That one is ESV.
Okay.
So I guess I certainly I start with the foundation that's where we go, and I'm just wondering if all the confusion and all this rising hatred is it just a plot of Satan to distort the real with the fake? I guess is what I'm wondering.
Let's analyze that one a bit, because that requires several different pieces to understand it. Number one is, yes, it's always a battle every day, good and light, period. Are there Republicans who come out and say, well, you got to let a trans kid be a trans kid? Yes. Is that evil? Yes. Does it mean they're a sect? Well, actually it does, but they still brand themselves a Republican. They're certainly not a conservative like you or I.
Exactly.
Now, no mistaking, I'm a Jew, right? And I've always been open about that. So what your question is, are you asking a question of the biblical people?
No,
hold on.
Oh, okay.
Are you asking the question of the biblical people, or are you asking the question of a more modern interpretation of what a Jew is? Because here's what I will tell you. When you look at, quote unquote, the New Testament, right? And a lot of stuff described in the New Testament, most people don't understand that the vast majority of that document was authored several hundred years past the advent of what you would refer to as the time of Christ. And most people think the Paul that was at in Gethsemane, in the garden and everything, you're going to be the rock of my church, was that Paul wrote it. And that's just not correct. It was later. That's number one. So you also have to look at a timeline in a vast amount of these. You also have to understand that the Bible was canonized 500 years later, and then 1,000 years later, who decided what we could or could not learn.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to me, anytime you put man in that, I'm for read it all, learn.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's go back to Jesus. His name was not Jesus Christ. His first name was Jesus, right? Jesus was murdered for what reason? Not the biblical reason that you're taught in New Testament. What was the literal reason that Jesus was put to death?
Threat to power structure?
Correct. The fellow that you know as Jesus, who is the Messiah, told you, you see these buildings? You see these money changers, you see this horseshit called they're treating it politics and pushing you around, and you've got to give so much of your crops and stuff to them. He's basically telling people that's horseshit. And you don't go through these people to talk or be in dialogue with or in communion with your Father, meaning God. So the sin he created in the Philistines and all the old rabbinic law was he basically told you, this is all man-made.
Mm-hmm.
That you have a direct connection with God. Well, that was blasphemy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you got to go through the rabbis, and ultimately you got to go through the church, which is why the church had the dark ages. Doesn't mean the sky's darkened. It means they forbid all learning. They sucked it all in. Anything they put out was in Latin, the Latin Vulgate, so people couldn't read it, and that was the secret language. You got to understand why these things exist.
Mm-hmm.
So what's kind of going on at the moment? You've got to remember the Bible, as in the Testaments, Jesus times backwards, doesn't mention Satan.
Mm-hmm.
We have Lucifer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which was the most beautiful, the most powerful, the most charming of all, that went bad. The devil, brimstone, pitchfork, horned, red, fire, that only came back much later in New Testament, and only really came into being, as you know, as the Satan part of it, when the inquest was going on and they were trying to get peasants to turn away. And peasants could be anything from Gnostics or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the earthly deities and whatever, and connecting to the earth and put it in one. And so they had to threaten people, farmers, we'll call it, with something that farmers could understand. They could understand crops could kill you, wild beasts could kill you, and pitchfork was their weapon. And so you got this amalgam of Satan that we've known today. But you have to understand that's a man-made creation, right? Satan is not going to step out into your street to convince you to do something looking with horns and pitchforks and fire.
Mm-hmm.
Satan is going to look like the most hottest chick you ever want to throw down with in your life, and she's interested in you, right? You got to understand that's the great deception. And so what I see going on in all of this, you can have what you call a Rothschild Jew. What you have is Jews who have turned away from their faith, Jews that have turned away from God. I cannot understand why so many Jews seem to vote Democrat.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't freaking get it. I have, if anything, you should be hardcore conservative.
Right.
But you have what's called Jewish guilt. Now, what is Jewish guilt? How did this happen? In Judaism, you are forbidden to proselytize. That means a Jew's not going to stand up and preach, and you must convert now or you're going to hell. There's no Jimmy Swaggart Jews, right? Because that's forbidden. Jew is about, you learn the old ways, you learn the laws, you learn it well, and then you decide, do you want this kind of connection to God? It's your own personal choice. It's not, well, you got to be baptized to get to God. There's no of this kind of stuff. And so in the no proselytization part of it, you basically got a people that have always been abused their entire existence. Now, let me just ask you a few questions. If Jews weren't a key to something, why would Hitler want to get rid of them? If Jews weren't the key of something, why would Pharaoh want all of the firstborn sons killed if there really wasn't something to it? Right.
Well, I think there's no doubt they are always at the center of all these big things.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's undoubtable, and that's where I just wonder. Then does that become the target for creating a counterfeit version?
It does, and I'm not sure I agree with your term counterfeit version, but here's what I would offer you. As you know, I'm a German Jew, and I'm a German Jew whose family went into hiding in Nazi Germany, and we're very lucky that we all weren't obliterated. My great grandmother and grandfather and stuff was, but by the grace of God, here I am. And I'm an American first, period. But the Jews in Poland and in Germany and everything else did not start speaking up against the system because it was just kind of not kosher to do. That's not kosher. That's where that term comes from. It was not kosher to do. But damn it, 2 out of 3 of us were dead by that time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're dead by that time of when the Jews finally spoke up. With that comes this incredible, horrible guilt. Now, it's a combination of two things. You live your entire life that people automatically judge you, that you think you're hot fucking shit because God says you're chosen people. You spend your entire life saying you're kind of interpreting that wrong, but everybody instantly looks at you as if you think you're better than them. And it's just not how you think. So all of a sudden you're born into this life that you actually become an apologist, right? You kind of have to justify your existence. That's not what it really means. Nobody's saying they're better than you. Knock it off, right? And you've always kind of had this, well, if I don't understand it, it must be bad. It's like the New Age movement when yoga was going to turn you into a Satanist, right? If you don't understand it, it goes bad. So you grow up with these stigmas. In my family, it was not allowed to be talked about. You didn't utter it, right? It was just shameful. So combined with that piece of you always have to defend yourself, and then the second piece that you have to realize that 2/3 of your people get exterminated on the planet before you spoke up, you have this horrible guilt. And that horrible guilt took a lot of Jewish families that, and I'm just going to say it for as I see it, tried to fucking fit in, right? Now, the triangulation that happens when they say, well, you got all these Jewish doctors and you got all these Jewish lawyers and you see it and they're all in media and whatever. Again, you don't know your history. Let me give you an example. In biblical times, in what you would call a Christian, is Christians couldn't handle a dead body. Jews could. So who by default became the doctors? Jews. Because in Christendom, you're not going to cut on a body. You're not even going to try to heal it because, oh, that's Satanist and that's voodoo. So by default, what happened is a lot of Jews became doctors because it's not forbidden. Then you got the other side. In Christian terms, you have this little thing called usury, right? Like meaning charging interest. In Judaism, it's not outlawed. So who by default became the bankers? Jews, because they could put the transactions together and they could make all these things work. So that's where you got that particular one. Then after the Holocaust, a lot of Jews said, we've got to make sure this can never happen again. They got into media to make sure the world could get the truth. But when you've got all this whole time trying to convince you should be ashamed for being Jewish and you should be this, a lot of people fell to the sexiness. Oh, I got to be hip. I got to be cool. That's them. I'm not like that. And you've got to embrace every wild liberal theory there is just to justify your existence. And that's kind of what happened with Hollywood and how Hollywood and media got taken over and why there are so many Jews, because it became a profession after the years. But you're ashamed of, you should be holding yourself to a higher standard. And so in your rush to say, well, I'm not like them, you actually go the opposite extreme to prove you're not. Get it? And so you allow the vile to come in and you allow the nastiness to come in and this. And so, but that happens everywhere. It's just like you have rhinos. You have people that play like they're conservatives, Republicans that will sell your ass down the river. You have some some Democrats that could actually be good people. They're not all bad. It's every sector, every place, every group of people. Now that is the science of mankind. And what happens when mankind and free will and faith, and whether you have a strong ethic or not, collide. But unfortunately, it's too easy to focus on the Jewish aspect of it. Now, why? I mentioned it earlier. The system needs to give you something to look at, right? And it's like I talked about. I wouldn't convict Hillary over the email thing because it wouldn't move the thing. I'd expose it, tell everybody you want a conspiracy, and I'd write laws to make it not happen again. But the system will gladly give you that Harvey Weinstein. Look at him, and you look over here at this guy. He went to prison, and you think the system did something for you. They did nothing. They gave you a little bitty sacrifice and kept you looking away from the whole cabal.
Right.
And so You're either a Jew that understands that, like maybe Melke and myself, or Roseanne and myself, that fight against that stuff
Yeah.
and understand how this system works. But again, and I see it online all the time, and I invite people on to kind of talk me through it. The system, I believe, right now is working harder than they ever have in the time of history to convince you that Jewish people are evil and that really Israel controls the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Look,
It's rampant.
it's all over the place. They've demonized what Zionism means. It means you just want to be free and have your own country, which God promised. But again, if you can convince enough people to hate Jews for simply being Jews, and you can get them to make that leap in your mind by having you just believe because they're Jewish, they're evil, you're one step away from them eradicating God permanently in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Because to turn away from the Jewish people, you have to turn away from God.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can't be of two minds. You can't say, well, it's just like I told people in my program this morning. You cannot say that the left pays influencers to put psychological operations in our hand and fight this war, and then find out the right does the same shit, but it's okay because you happen to be on the right. It's not. You either have absolute morals and ethics or you don't. If you don't, you're of two minds. And if you're of two minds, that's why we get nothing solved, because we can't even decide what we are.
Yeah.
And so I believe the Jewish people are under attack. It's more than I've ever seen. It's horrible. I understand all sides of it because in my family, it was forbidden to talk about the fact that we were Jews. My mother was Jewish and all this other stuff. It was absolutely forbidden in my household. And I understand where that comes from, because over time, if you're hunted down and exterminated from it, to protect your kids from being murdered, you will basically tell them, shut the hell up, and you will act as un-Jewish as you can to convince the world around you you're not one of those people. So they don't out you, don't make you wear that yellow star, and don't march your asses off to the oven. It's called survival, self-survival. I understand why it happens.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on all that. I guess my question was more centered on, if
you mean after that I still didn't answer your question,
well,
then you got to put it more bluntly,
yeah,
brother. Ask me what you're asking me.
Well,
you're not going to hurt my feelings. Go.
I think if I were the devil or Satan, whatever you want to put on it, and your goal would be exactly what you just said. Your goal is to destroy the Jewish people, because then you destroy God's promise, because he says, no, I will hold them up.
It makes God's word worth nothing.
Yes. And so I guess my question is just, if that were my strategy, then I would create a counterfeit version, and I'd do everything I could to get the world to hate that counterfeit version. I'd sign the Balfour Declaration.
Is it a counterfeit version, or is it a weak version?
No,
or is it a historically disconnected version, or you actually think there's a counterfeit version?
I'm just wondering if there's a line to be drawn with, like, what we currently think of as the nation state of Israel that was created in 1947, compared to the biblical bloodline of the Jewish people.
Well, you were able to re-immigrate to become an Israeli citizen based on your ancient bloodline that was provable. You can't do it any other way. So see, I think you're dividing a line that's not really a line. You don't just go to Israel because it's May 14th, 1947, or whatever the case may be, and boom, you're Israeli. No. You were allowed to repatriate your land so you could officially embrace what your citizenship would have been had you not been subject to the diaspora, right? Dispersed across the world.
Right.
So you could go back and basically claim your homeland, which was denied. Now, is that event in 47 different than anything else? No, because it had it, and it's still to this day, it has to be proved in your bloodlines. I have my bloodlines to past the first century.
Well, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It has to be proven. You don't just get to go there and, well, I'm automatically Israeli or I'm automatically Jewish. Now, granted, there are Israeli citizens now that aren't Jewish, but you use the term Jewish as if there was a fake Jew etc. No, you have to prove your bloodlines to even get to that capacity. So I'm just saying with you, I don't draw the demarcation line at the quote unquote modern founding of Israel. I don't. You either are, you aren't. It's rather binary based on your mother's heritage and doing it back. You either are, you aren't. Now the question is whether you embrace it or not. But it's no different being born into a Baptist family or a Mormon family. You got free will, baby. You might decide not to be what your parents are, and all faith and all kids are living in a system that's trying to cleave you from your parents and your roots. Why? Because if we can disconnect you from your parents and your roots, we can control you. Now think about how far this has gone. They have shaken the foundation of this world to convince boys you're a girl and a girl you're a boy. This is pure evil. And so I don't draw that line at the Jewish state. I know what people say about the Rockefellers and stuff and Freemasons and all this stuff. A lot of it, people want answers. People are always going to look for answers, but they don't look deep enough into the history of it to really understand what it was versus what it has been transliterated into today and taken on a life of its own. I primarily think the movies, Hollywood, and the need for having bad men. So I don't draw my line at the Israel state or the Rockefellers.
Okay, well, that's why I wanted to ask, because I learned something new. I didn't know you had to really kind of prove the bloodline to go back in there. That's fascinating. All right, well, just one more question then. What do you think about the PCAPs? No, that's not it.
No. I think we got a better chance of finding them in the chambers down in the pyramid than having them legitimately turned over.
That's not it. One more serious question. As you were talking through a lot of that, or even in this whole interview today, so you're obviously Jewish, and we've established that. But you spoke a lot of Jesus too. Your view on Jesus as someone who's Jewish then? I mean, because you kind of spoke about him in this interview as if he was a historical figure. And
here's what I am. I am a Messianic Jew.
Oh, okay.
Now, a Messianic Jew,
like Jonathan Cahn.
Well, let me explain the idiosyncrasies and what a Messianic Jew is versus what some people say is a Messianic Jew. I am a Jew, and I am a Jew who believes in Jesus. Now, my belief in Jesus may vary from yours, and that's all based on the Nicene Creed, right? Father, Son, and Holy Ghost issue. Now, Messiah, however you want to say it or do it. In Judaism, there are many messiahs. Noah was a messiah. Enoch was a messiah. Abraham was a messiah. And a messiah basically means, the literal definition of a messiah, where all of this comes from, is the one who would bring you to the one true God of Abraham and Jacob, Isaac, and Jacob. So you have to ask yourself, was he the vehicle which brought the world predominantly to know the biblical faith of God and who even say Abraham is, right? That we all come from. And so the answer is undeniably yes.
Okay.
So I don't deny Jesus as a Messiah at all, period. And that doesn't, and now on the other spectrum of it, and I guess you haven't heard me in my programs before, when 9/11 happened and the dot-com crash happened, and then 9/11 and my whole world tumbled, and you lose $800 million of wealth in one damn day.
Yeah, stunning.
Right? And your wife goes away and files you with divorce papers because she's got her new boyfriend and all this other stuff. Your world tends to crumble. And what I decided to do, what I wanted to do is just deep research, but I decided I want to write theology research. And if you've ever seen me broadcast from any of my libraries, I have a magnificent, very old library of theology from all over, collecting all the ancient books and the whole stuff. But I thought seminary was my path.
Yeah.
Until you get to the point of seminary, and in order to get your degree in seminary, you have to accept the Nicene Creed. And the Nicene Creed basically is the following. It codifies that the Sabbath is Sunday, which it isn't. The Sabbath has always been Friday evening to Saturday evening. And I explained to the difference of people in time, why it got changed. Well, that got changed during the Nicene Creed, the Council of Nicaea, when they brought in 65 different bishops and stuff to decide what's the official faith of the world. Well, I have a problem with that. And I have a problem with that because they use 66 Bibles to say this is what's true. And they basically said, you're forbidden of reading the other 3,000. Well, I have the other 3,000. And I don't think mankind can decide that. Mankind can't arbitrarily decide, well, this is from God and this is not, right? And I happen to know some of the changes they made, like not making women have rights in theology. And that's a matriarch, thing that they did. They didn't want it. But if you go and look at all the Jewish Testament, some of the greatest teachers and stuff in the world were the women. But this new brand of church forbade that, went to a patriarch society. And so when you know certain things for why they happened, how they happened, and when they happened, I could not honestly, for the sake of a degree I wanted, once you begin reading things in ancient Greek or ancient Aramaic and you understand the Nicene Creed, and you find that moment in time where Jesus became God, right? There's always been God, but there's a moment in time when Jesus became God and when Jesus also became the Holy Spirit, which comes down to you as the Holy Trinity. I'm not challenging your faith at all. You that's a personal thing for you. But for me, in reading the ancient text and going through it, I found that I was at a crossroads that I 100% know that Jesus was in fact a Messiah. And quite frankly, outside of Noah, the most important Messiah may of all. But then to see how man changed things, and even to look at your own Bible. That's why I asked, what version are you creating? Because I can take you through the Bible and show you the different versions where the words change depending upon which version of the Bible you have. Now, to me, that's not godly, right? That's man.
Oh, this is so fast. It's always so fun to chat with you, Jovan. This is stunning.
Sure. And so because of those man errors that I can point out and I can show you, I can say I am in fact a Messianic Jew because I'm Jewish and I do believe that Jesus was in fact the Messiah. I can reject the man side of it where man has tinkered with it and man has manipulated words. And you can't go to your Bible, open it up to one chapter, one verse, and teach a whole lesson off of 5 words. I think that's crap because you can bend it any way you want. You got to understand the true document, the historical context of the document, what they were fighting at the time, and how we apply it to our life today. Because if you forget history, we're doomed. And all of this is to try to get us to forget history. And that's why, the Taliban was tearing down the ancient Assyrian statues and stuff. They need you to forget history. So that's the only difference for me is I look at it differently, just a little bit differently. I do not deny your faith. I don't think you should deny me my faith. I think it's very personal. But I've been on a very, very, very long scholarly journey on this. And I'm a product straddling that world of coming from a Christian family on my father's side, Jewish family on my mother's side in modern times, because it was Jewish way back all the way through. It creates an interesting conflict. I just decided I'll dig for answers and I will decide for myself.
What? That's so fascinating. What about the? Are you familiar with the 2 powers in heaven doctrine from early Jewish teaching?
And how are you relating that in context? It all depends on what context you're going to give me.
Well, in the context of, at least to my understanding, that a lot of people until about the 3rd century AD, even in Jewish teaching, considered that as basically God the Father and Jesus as in the Old Testament.
But you're talking the 3rd century.
That's when they stopped teaching that, from my understanding. But early on, there was this doctrine called the 2 powers in heaven. It's these weird verses in the Old Testament where there's like 2 Yahwehs, and they're like, well, wait, this is one verse, but there's 2 Yahweh characters, or it's Yahweh and the name.
There is a debate over whether it's Elohim, El Shaddai, Yahweh, etc., specifically Yahweh, where in relatively modern times they've tried to convince you it's 2 different characters, but what I submit to you is we're dealing a lot with transliterations where the languages weren't that clear. And when you're dealing with the subject of a language of ancient Hebrew that's the opposite of your own, in that it's read from right to left versus left to right, and there are no vowels,
Mm-hmm.
and it does have genders. There is if you're saying it to a woman, it's this way. If you're meaning a woman, it can be the same word, but it changes if you're referring to a man, and it's that.
Yeah.
And so I think in the gender tenses, the time tenses, the different way you have to learn the syntax, because it's actually Proto-Canaanite. Before that is a lot got lost in translations. And so if you're looking at something in 200 or 300, you will find that was their understanding of our language then versus what we really know now and has been cleaned up. But yet, because it was a constant battle, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be talked back, and they can point back to the second century. I do have to tell you, you gave me a time period that is New Testament. And one of the things you've seen me do is when I have these discussions, I talk about the time period of the Old Testament, but I do happen to mention a character and who and what he was of the New Testament, but I am not in any way quoting the New Testament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Do you
I
understand?
did.
You understand subtle differences?
Oh, I did, absolutely.
I have a serious material issue with the New Testament, and it goes back to the very, very first book I ever worked on as a young man.
Huh.
I was 19 years old, and that book was a massive study that went all the way into the Vatican and everything else. And it was called the Book of Revelations Revealed, and what it really meant. But that'd be a whole different discussion.
Wow. So let me just wrap this up and see if I got this right. As a Jewish man, you went to seminary and you got through some level of seminary before deciding not to do it. But you essentially went to a Christian seminary, and you were close. You were on that path. Just why? I mean, what?
100%.
How many lifetimes have you lived, Jovan? Because, ladies and
Way
gentlemen,
too many.
let me tell you, I tried for 3 hours again today to find some topic that Jovan does not know something about, and he is just a wealth of knowledge.
There's many things I don't know. Like, I don't know how to not piss off people. We could talk about that. I couldn't tell you how to not piss off people.
Well, me
I
either.
don't know how to not infuriate trolls or liberals. Like, I don't know a lot about that, or I'd fix it, right? No, it's just my plight and my history. And I guess it's why, different books have been published on my unique family history. I'm kind of an anomaly that I have multiple sets of grandparents that at different times, if you go back to my family, which comes from very great, well-known ruling families and stuff at different time periods, I stood 6 times over, I have stood a 50-50 chance in great wars or wars between mankind and tribes and stuff, or countries, that if any one of my grandparents would have gotten killed on either side, I would not be here.
Of course.
And in my particular history, that occurred 6 different times. So I'm like this really weird anomaly. And it just so happened that my mother, which is extremely old school, right, and going back in family history, married an American guy who is very Americanized, but because of their particular Irish and Welsh history, come from the Sinclairs. I just happened to come from that side of the family, where when they said the government was screwing up, they basically came in to try to shut down the government, and all of them got beheaded and their wealth taken away, and they got banished, and that's how they ended up eventually over time in the Americas. And so I have a really interesting cross in that, but I'm fascinated. I want to know where I come from and what makes me tick.
Yeah.
And when you realize how many of your ancestors have paid a dear price for all of us to be here, I just think we owe it to them to know who we are. And so many kids today can't even tell you what their grandparents' names are, full name is, and where they were born, or their history. And so it's not that It just happens. The dialogue we're having happens to be in subjects I know about. Yes, it helps. I'm an autodidact, but that's just how I'm
It's so
wired,
cool. So
right?
cool.
And so I can't help if I read it, I remember it. I've been an autodidact my whole life. I just want to be able to use the knowledge responsibly. I cannot tell you how to be. I can tell you things that were hidden from you, and maybe you should consider these. But I fully honor your full will because that's what God gave you. He gave you full will, and it's up to you to decide what you do with it once you know. I just happen to be, I'm a tool. That's it. I'm a tool.
That's cool. It's just, I mean, for a lot of people, graduating college is an accomplishment, or certainly going to seminary is the crown accomplishment of their life. And for you, it's just like another chapter, and then you're out exploring pyramids and writing books about how gardening, and it's just
I can't
fascinating.
help it.
It's
You know,
I
I
love it.
think we live in such a fascinating world. And it's very disheartening, but we live in such a fascinating world. And I just feel if you ever stop learning and having that quest for knowledge, you basically stop growing. And when you stop growing, it's just like any fruit, it begins to rot. And I'm just not ready to rot yet.
Well, yeah, and I'm nothing on your level, Jovan, but
No,
you
no,
know,
no, no,
I
no. Look, I am, stop saying that. Because number one, I want to tell you, it makes me angry. And I don't want you to say that.
all
Let me
right.
tell you why. My mother was a heroin addicted alcoholic prostitute, right? I am nothing special. I was a welfare baby. I am nothing special. The only difference in me and anyone else is I realized, damn it, if I want to know it, I'll go out and seek it and find it. And I put my trust in that or I wouldn't be here. And that is the only difference. It may sound like I'm off the charts and stuff. And yes, your IQ builds the more you know, but we are no different. You are doing exactly what I do. You're excavating, you're looking for answers, you're trying to provide answers, you're sharing it with people, you're opening people's minds. So don't do that to yourself because there truly is nothing special about me other than I take God seriously. And I feel like if I don't practice with the gifts he gave me, I'm sinning and I'm just not willing to sin.
Yeah, that's really
That's
good.
it. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, I find it so fascinating in today's world. I grew up, watching stuff like Star Trek and Star Wars, and on Star Trek, they could talk to the computer and basically learn anything they wanted or build anything. We basically have that now, and
We
I
have it right
understand.
now.
I understand these AIs. Some of them are programmed to be, biased or they lie to you or whatever. But you can essentially sit down with these chatbots. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times during the day I'll look at something around me or be like, well, I wonder why that's that way. And you can just ask it and you can learn everything you wanted to know about that topic. And I'm personally amazed that people aren't just captivated by this. I mean, we live in the world of the Star Trek computer and people are acting like it's not here.
That's right.
It's
Look,
crazy.
we live in the smartest, dumbest time ever. We have everything at our fingertips. In fact, I tested one of the AIs and I gave it a medical formulation for a result because I have a lot of medical patents. And I asked the AI how it would solve it. And it gave me back the formula for solving it 100% bang on. I was just like amazed. But at the time we have the greatest ability to learn anything, to know anything, to find anything or discover anything is the time when mankind's doing its best to make us ignorant and dumbed down even more. But you have a choice. So we live in the greatest, dumbest time ever because they've taught us it's got to be in 70 characters or less, or you need all you need to know in the headline when it's all that's mankind. That's deception. You got to push yourself.
Jovan, last question, then we truly will wrap up. But I've always meant to ask you, you were talking about your family history and, incredible lines that you come from. Your last name, any relation to the prize, the Pulitzer
None.
Prize? Just
Zero.
total coincidence.
No, and no, it's by design. I was born Jeffrey Jovan, Jovan, Philyaw, Philyaw, which is original French derivation from my father's side, because on my father's side we're Merovingian, was Philppeaux. I grew up in a home where you got to imagine how bad it is for a father who got 3 kids you got to be a bad mom in the 60s, right? For a dad to get 3 kids, one of them being a toddler who really should be nursing. That's how bad my mother was. My mother got us for a time. And the only way we got out of it is 2 nuns discovered my 2 little sisters walking down the street begging for food. They followed my little sisters back to the house where I was, and all 3 of us were living under the porch while my mom was drunk and drugging and prostituting upstairs in a row house. And so they got us back to my dad. Jeffrey was given to me by my mother. I never had any connection to that. I didn't meet her till I was in my 20s.
Wow.
And I had already been in media in television for years, and people only knew me as Jovan, Jovan, Jovan. And so in the 90s, when I had my, I had a top hit Fox show, that means the network. I followed in living color in most cities. I followed in living color, and then I came on just before Politically Correct with Bill Maher, and I was syndicated all over the place. But at that time, I attracted a stalker. And the stalker was bound and determined to make me his bitch. And yes, I mean him. And he was about 6'6", 350 pounds. And he started severely stalking me. It started with emails. It started with emails and stuff. And it got to the point, I have 3 girls, and then I have my newborn son. And it got to the point that he was potentially getting into our gated neighborhood. Now, it was all my fault because I was on TV.
Wow.
And I had a vanity license plate, Jovan, right? I was stupid. I was vain.
Sure.
And so this is just when the internet, in the 90s, a few people, late 90s, people could start doing things. You wouldn't know it as the internet today, but it was what it was. And so this guy was able to find my home address.
Those AOL CDs in the mail.
Right. You're still getting AOL CDs and all that shit.
Yeah.
So this guy found me and tracked me down. And it became to the point that, I'm struggling with, unfortunately, I'm going to have to kill this son of a bitch. And if I do, it's going to be a problem. Well, I was always kind of a media magnet. So we were about to have my son. And already I was like this Wall Street wonder kid, and I'd done all this big stuff. I wanted a junior, but I didn't want a junior to think that I had to have a junior that lived up to me. So in the midst of this stalking stuff, and I realized that this guy found me through public records, I did a maneuver that Thomas Mapother did. Do you know Thomas Mapother?
No.
Or Thomas Mapother III?
No.
Yeah, that's Tom Cruise.
Okay.
In the media world, you ultimately have to end up protecting yourself. And the way you do that is you do that through a legal name change with a lot of legal and FBI hooks in it, so people can't find your public records and stalk you. And this is why you find so many stars that as one name actually have a different birth name. So when I decided to do this transaction, because remember, I was already successful, but I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do you keep somebody from stalking you? Because I'm dealing with this. That's when I decided to really change my name. So here's how it came about. I'd always signed my signature J. Jovan Filion. And so I took Jovan, which is my middle name, and I moved it up to the front. So that became the J. When we decided the name that we were going to name our son, we had decided on the middle name would be Hutton, Hutton. And so in reality, instead of naming my son after me, I named myself after my son.
That's so cool.
To honor my son. And so then when it came to the last name, people, you can see Tom Mapother or Mary Michael Morrison, which is John Wayne, all these other ones. People do it. And so what happened here is when I decided I was going to choose my last name, I knew that eventually I would head into writing. Now, it happened at a very interesting time in my life where the press started to vilify me, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because they were getting a hint I was conservative, even though I was in a very, very liberal world. And I sat on the board with the director right? The executive director of the Associated Press. We sat on the same board, right? And this guy eventually turned on me because he was a staunch Democrat. And when all the .com world went crazy, I'd already started on it. So to tell you honestly, I knew I'd eventually head into writing. Now I'm what, like 300 books later I've written since that time. So I chose the name Pulitzer for two reasons. If you're going to vilify me just because I'm a conservative, and you hate that I'm a conservative, and you think only the tech world gets the Stanford degrees and the Harvard degrees, and only liberals should be it, that's when this really became a liberal thing. Then I said, every time you write about me and you write bullshit, I'm going to destroy your icon. And who was their icon? Their icon was Joseph Pulitzer.
Oh, that's funny.
And Pulitzer is the Pulitzer Prize for journalism. But see, Joseph Pulitzer is known for what's called yellow journalism, meaning make up shit about politicians. That's why they called it yellow journalism.
Yeah.
You learn about Pulitzer, the newspaper magnate, but what he really had predominantly over some of the bigger papers were fucking tabloids. And so I basically said, great, you're going to do this? Then bottom line, my last name's always been with a P. I'm choosing fucking Pulitzer. And every time you bash me, it's destroying your fucking icon. So fuck you.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where it's my legal name. It's on my State Department ID, passport, everything you name it. It's my full legal name, has been for 26, 27 years or whatever it is.
Amazing.
It's Jovan Hutton Pulitzer. And so I tell people it's Jovan, like Musk, Jovan Musk, 70s cologne. It's Hutton, like E.F. Hutton, right? You should listen. And it's Pulitzer, but I'm not like the gift, which is the prize, which is what you asked. I'm not the prize. I'm more like the free parting gift if you hurry up and order now.
Amazing story.
And that's the story.
I'm so glad I asked.
I never thought somebody could find out where you live and show up on your doorstep. And I think if somebody wants to cornhole you, I think I should have a say in it, don't you? And he wasn't going to give me a say.
You changed the name. Did he just eventually go away, or what happened?
Oh no, got incarcerated.
Okay.
Big issue for my family, private security services.
Okay.
Movements, machinations and stuff. And it all started very innocuously. I'd get these emails because I always put my real email out there on television back then, and people could write me. And I started getting emails. Hey, how'd you like that filet mignon the other night? I saw you ordered the side of asparagus. I actually had this. And I thought that's like really freaking weird. And I just thought it was a fan who wouldn't reveal themselves. Loaded. I know that it was a fellow that became deadly obsessed with me and sexually obsessed with me. And was just hell-bent on I think if it had a chance, he would have either killed some or all of my children and or my spouse and or me. Wow. And it just became that deadly. So it only happened in a legal maneuver to protect myself.
Yeah. What I got to close the loop. What was the big show you were doing?
Well, I did a show and I started out in the mid 90s. I had at that time, you wouldn't have known it was me, but when you were seeing the Tony Little Gazelle glider on TV, or the Jack LaLanne juicer, or Where There's a Will, There's an A, or Hooked on Phonics, and all these things that came on late night TV, you wouldn't have known, but I was the guy behind the scenes that would develop the products, who would be the celebrity, how do you package it, and then our company would syndicate the time across all the networks.
Wow.
And so I was involved heavily in just massive amounts of creating and packaging personality. So I guess you could say I was a product agent and an agent at the same time. And so after I left that industry, it was the first time I retired. I said, when I had a celebrity that I had taken from a housewife making $14,000 a year, and her first royalty check 4 months later was $4 million. And then she wants me to treat her like a star because she is a star. After I have this, 1 year, $500 million juggernaut built around her, I said, fuck it, people don't deserve this, don't deserve to be turned into stars. That was Susan Powter, Stop the Insanity. And so I walked away. And I was at my ranch just punching cattle and ranching. And I would have junior high and high school kids that would work at the ranch for odd jobs. And one young guy asked me if I'd ever seen a BBS, a bulletin board. I didn't. I kind of knew what CompuServe was or something like that. So he kind of showed me the bulletin board, and my head went off. I go, ding, 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 this is going to be big. So I started researching it. And about that time, I got a call from the Hunt family that said, hey, will you kind of look at this thing kind of called the internet? We think it's going to come about. We just don't know how to market it. Would you come in because of all my previous successes? And will you teach us how can we sell this thing called the internet? So I came in, and that was when you used to get your AOL floppy disk. It was still a floppy disk then in the newspaper every Sunday, and there was really AOL. And so I'm looking at this, and I understand this thing called the internet. That's when we had dial-up modems. The 2800 baud modem had just come out.
28, I remember.
Yeah, there were really not many pictures and stuff on the internet. And so my job was to figure out, could we really sell the internet, and could we get people to buy it? Therefore, would it make computers take off? So a few things kind of happened at the same time.
This is the Kansas City Chiefs Hunt family?
It's the one in the same, the Hunt family.
Yeah, the Hunt family. Okay, wow.
So they were the financial backers and stuff.
Wow.
And so, can I figure it out? So I said, well, let me look at it. And I figured it out. And I said, I think I can sell this. And I said, we'll sell head-to-head against AOL. AOL charged by the minute. And I said, here's where we need to go with it. We're going to charge $19.95. Now, remember, you could have several $100 internet bills back then.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to make it $19.95 a month. And it's all you can eat. I don't care if you keep on 24/7. Well, AOL's largest pop, or third largest pop at the time, was Dallas-Fort Worth. And they had about 4,000 users. And so I tried this new concept called dial-up to get around. See, online wasn't the internet. Online was what they want you to see.
Yeah.
There's this thing calling the internet. And I said, I think I can sell the internet. So I came up with that concept of $19.95 a month and went. And lo and behold, in a matter of a couple of months, I put 60,000 people in one city on this thing called the internet. So it took off like a juggernaut, and it set the pace for, okay, online's over, CompuServe goes, AOL goes. It's now you're on the information superhighway and you're doing it. So I cracked that thing. And in the process of doing that, to help people understand it, I created a television show called The Insiders. And what I did is I modeled it after Friends, which was the hit TV show at the time. And it was just a hip people in the know of here is why you should use the internet, and went on late night TV and taught people to use the internet and sold the hell out of it. Well, what happened is that took off, and all it was a sales and marketing tool. And I go, well, shit, that should really be a bona fide television program then. And so I went to ABC, who knew me, and I sat down with ABC and I said, I want to do a television series about the internet because it's going to change our world. And I remember the ABC board there locally telling me the internet's a fad. It's going to go away. And I said, well, I think you're wrong. And they said, not interested. And I went over to Fox Television in the same town. And it was the fellow that Buff Parham is his name, had a lot to do with the old Mary Tyler Moore show and stuff. And Fox Television was brand new. And they just decided to do their own programming, which you know as In Living Color. And they had just a couple of cities, and they were doing old movies and stuff, but their original programming was in Living Color. And so I went over to Buff and I sat down and said, look, this thing called the internet is going to change the world. And he said, I believe in you. I don't know what to think about this internet, but I know who you are and I know what you could do. So he made me a deal. And he says, if you can get me a show where we don't have to touch it, and you can beam me the show from a studio where I can just take it, I'll give you a time slot and let's see if it works.
Wow.
Well, the time slot was Friday nights, 10 p.m. to midnight. That's prime time late night TV.
Yeah, it is.
And so they give me this slot, and I put together, I'm already doing radio now. I'm teaching people over radio to use the internet. We called it Net Talk Live. And I'm teaching people to use the internet.
Jovan,
And,
what was the product that you were selling? The 1995 product.
That company was called 1-800 Be a Geek, right?
Okay.
It was Internet America, right?
Oh, okay. All
People
right.
know Internet America
Yeah,
or
I've heard that.
Earthlink and all those, Internet America.
Wow. Okay.
And so I did my radio show. I'd already got some notoriety on my radio show because I was the guy that took the Star Report, which was Bill's spill on Monica's dress.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the one that digitized it, put it online so everybody could have access it for the first time. And I came out with a website that taught people how to write their Congress people and know who it was. Anyway, that kind of took off on its own. So I knew I had something here. I did a live radio remote in the field. At a radio remote, you normally have 50 people show up, and all of a sudden I got several thousand people to show up. So I knew in radio world I had a hit. So I turned it into a television show. I debuted on Fox TV, 10 o'clock at night on a Friday night. The way television works in the ratings, lo and behold, I'm competing against the news and late night TV or whatever, but I'm doing in this Dallas-Fort Worth, which was the fourth largest marketplace in the US, I'm doing what's called a 50 share. What that means is out of every two people watching TV at that time, one of them was watching me.
Wow.
And so it just became this juggernaut. And so I decided I got to see if this is really real. So I cut a deal with Microsoft to help them because they were trying to get out Windows NT as an operating system for business. And they were just fighting internet. They were just bringing out Internet Explorer. And that's when we all used Netscape. And so I told Microsoft, I said, come into my show and I'll do two things for you. I will change the dynamics and get you a foothold in the market for using NT, but I guarantee you, I think I can win this browser war against Netscape if you'll just follow my lead.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that you're the guy we have to blame for Internet Explorer?
Unfortunately, yes. And so Netscape at the time had 97% or 95% of the marketplace. Microsoft took a little bitty chance on me because they knew it locally. This was the same building, the same crew where Bill met Melinda. That's where she worked, right? His wife. And I said, look, I can just teach people this thing called the internet. So they decided to invest in my program, meaning give me sponsorship money. And I went to town and I went to do a live event in downtown Dallas with their backing. And I had 44,000 people show up in downtown Dallas in March 7th, 1997, which the internet was just starting to have a news bit, but 44,000 people showed up to hear me talk live and teach people about the internet. It shut down the whole city. We couldn't even fit in Reunion Arena. That's when I knew I had a hit, and that's when we syndicated. And so we syndicated countries all around the world. My radio show went to some 700 radio stations across the nation. The television show was about 600 affiliates. And because I owned the program, you watched me in Dallas on ABC, and because we kept on growing. So I eventually outgrew Fox. You watched me in Dallas on ABC. Maybe you watched me in Austin, Texas on Fox, and maybe you watched me in Phoenix on the CW. But also at the same time, you could watch a version of it on PBS. You could watch me on the USA channel. You could watch me on Lifetime. And so I kept all the feeds open and dealt with the network where we literally had billions of homes reached. And I became the evangelist teaching people this thing called the internet and introducing to them, hey, this is a new thing coming. It's called Photoshop. Here's how it's going to work. And in TV land, episodic show means it came on once a week, but somewhere in the country, because of syndication, it was playing every day of the week somewhere. But in TV land, you hoped that you can get 13 to 26 episodes, right? You seasons.
Yeah.
A season is usually 10 episodes. And so in a world for episodic series where you're lucky to get more than one or two seasons, I was on TV in TV terms, 40 seasons, which is the 41st longing episodic TV series, just behind Star Trek New Generation, Falcon's Crest, I Love Lucy, and I forget what the other one is.
Simpsons.
because I was self-syndicated. I wasn't a network product. And then in 2000, I sold the show and went off the air hosting in TV and retired my ass again and went off the air. And when I went off the air, it only took it could only survive another 6 weeks without me, and the whole franchise died. It was just over.
Wow.
And that's when I had already been developed my tech career. And that's when I went in my tech career, did all that tech stuff, went to the .com, decided, fuck it, I'm retiring again and I'm going to seminary.
Wow.
And I stayed totally in retirement until I started again tinkering with some healthcare patents and says, okay, I want to change the healthcare industry. And while I was making breakthroughs in medicine using cameras, computer vision, artificial intelligence, and computer learning, is when we had the 2016 election leading up to 2020. And when I saw 2020, something was wrong. And I realized I could use my technology and skills to figure out what happened and broke America. And that's what got me on fighting for trying to save our country. So yes, and I don't really know how old you are, but you would see it, and it was in every city in the country, and we were late night TV, and that's where I get a lot of my humor from, because I can throw dark late night kind of comedy humor twist at you, but it's because I spent so many years in that seat using a cast of characters, and ironically, that was it came with 27, so that'd be almost 20. It's 27 years ago now, 28 years ago now when I debuted this series, and it was myself and my co-host, who eventually people found out we got married. We never let anybody know we were husband and wife. I had one geeky, dorky nerd, and the other guy was a really good-looking Ricky Ricardo Puerto Rican, and another black lady co-host, Georgia Foy, very well-known. And I had this interesting, diverse cast of characters that had something for everybody appealing in it. And we basically just had fun. That told you the computer is going to be the gateway to your life. Here's how you should do it. That's what, there it is. There you go. So when I say I cast it like Friends, on the left, that is Georgia, who after the lady on the left with the red hair for me, you see me in the blue shirt, that's my ex-wife. But the lady far left is who eventually became my co-host. And so that was the cast of characters of all different kinds of people that had monikers. So you had Dave Matthews in the yellow shirt. He was Gadget Guy. And then you had Luis on the right, the Puerto Rican fellow. We called him Weberican. Or you had Kim Adams on the right, which was Chat Chick. And we did this incredible series and had a hell of a run and made TV history at it. So that's where all my TV stuff and all the stupid ass awards I've won for that stuff comes from. But it's sitting in that seat is nothing more than understanding how do you read the heartbeat of America and what do people really want to know and engage with. And so that's the series. When I talk about the series or being on TV, that was it. And it was some of the most fun I ever had in my life.
Absolutely incredible. I have no idea how you just walk in and get a TV show like that on the air, but that is,
you know how I thought I could do it. That's it. And because of my reputation, because I had created so many marketing juggernauts, right? I could tell them, look, I can make 20 million people or 50 million people pick up the phone. They knew my marketing stuff because they were running all the commercials. And I just said, look, I think this thing called the internet is going to change our world. And I want to create a TV show around it. And it was my reputation that allowed them to take a risk on me. And then the rest is history.
That's so cool. Well, maybe to bring it full circle and wrap this up, hearing all of the different careers that you've lived multiple lives back to back. And then you kind of just ended with 2016 and then where we're at now and 2025 and trying to fix these things. I know you've had some interactions with Elon online, like you mentioned earlier in the show. And I know you've met with President Trump. I sure hope there's some future that one or both of those guys is able to bring you in and put your genius to work, helping to save this country.
My only goal is for all of us, for us that are a little older, it's over. And even for you, this is for your kids and your grandkids. If they're even going to have an America to turn to. And I just can't turn my back on that. If I can do something about it, if I can think through it, if I can find it, and I can figure out how to fix it, and God gave me these talents, there is no way I'm turning my back on God, but there is certainly no way I am turning my back on my country. So I'm here to serve because I do believe we live in the greatest country on the planet. I do think we're all blessed to be here. I think that's why there's 160 nations at any one time trying to break into our borders.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to do what I can to make sure this works right. And you can still work right and be successful and have good values and cherish family and cherish tradition and cherish ethics. And I'm only here just to do what I can with the gifts God gave me. I'm just using what God gave me.
Well, Jovan, this has been a blast as always. So much fun, and truly an honor to have you on. Thank you for your time, and you're always so generous. Thank you for coming on.
Not a problem. Thank you.